Okay. I'm just waiting to make sure that the sound is working on YouTube. Boom. Just wait a minute. Just make sure we have proper. Okay, I can't hear anything. It could be my sound. Okay, it's working. Perfect. Okay, so yeah, the point of this specific stream is similar to last week. Is to basically do a comparison between essentially the stuff that Muhammad was claiming and the stuff that Paul was claiming to see which of them truly followed Jesus, right? Um, from a historian's perspective, the answer would be quite simple in the sense of there's no sort of doubt in a historian's mind that they're going to go with Paul purely on the basis of this historical circumstance that he lived in. Because remember, Paul was there in the first century with the disciples of Jesus, the earliest followers of Jesus. So for that reason alone, the veracity of anything he says about Jesus is taken far more seriously from a historical standpoint than anything Muhammad says, because Muhammad comes, 500-600 years later. And this is sort of primarily one of the key issues for especially for anyone who's a non-Muslim. I mean, if you're to convince them, you have to produce evidence. And in the last stream that I did last week, we had a couple of guests that came on, and it was the same sort of stuff I would expect from Muslims, which is, generally speaking, when they're pressed on stuff in their Quran or their Hadith for which there's no evidence, it's just circular reasoning. They try and create some avenue and argument that essentially forces you in some sense to have to go back to the Quran or their literature to affirm it. That's called circular reasoning, okay? The point that I was trying to make, and that I've always made with Muslims, is where's the extra Quranic sources, okay? Where's the extra Islamic sources that go outside of Islam that affirm the things that Islam say? So for example, if we take the crucifixion as an example, the consensus is that Christ was crucified because not only did his disciples and his followers write about his crucifixion, but then also his opponents. So there's congruency between what both the followers and the opponents of Jesus were saying in relation to that specific historic event. And that's why it's accepted as fact. Now, when you place the same standard upon the Quran in certain places with certain claims that it makes, it totally falls to pieces. So we're going to look at one now. This is from Sahih al-Bukhari 3364. I'm going to share my screen on this. And I'm going to I'm basically going to highlight the key part here. And again, I'm desiring for evidence here. Like, that's the thing I'm looking for. Where do we go here? Share screen. Sahih Bukhari 3364. Share. Okay. So, I'm going to give a bit of context, and then I'm going to explain why this is an ahistorical claim, not just from my perspective, but also from the perspective of linguistics. And I'm going to give a source to demonstrate that. We're also going to go to, a little later, the drowning of Pharaoh, because, again, explanation is required for that. Because in a number of places, and again, this is an argument I've made 100 times over, but essentially, the Quran refutes itself when stacked against the evidence that we have today. There's clear ahistorical claims the text makes, which, by the way, I just want to point something out here that's quite important. At the end of the day, when like, if we're talking about the veracity of Muhammad's claim to prophethood, one of the things I would expect, and it's a fair expectation, is for him to be, if he's recording data in what he deems to be revelation from God or God working through him, then I would expect that data to be accurate. I wouldn't expect, for example, for him to make clear historical errors. Okay. So an example would be, and we can look at this maybe at another time, but um, Abraham and the fire, the word Ur, so that word Ur of the Chaldeans, um, Muhammad seems to think that that word means fire. Okay, and the reason he seems to think that is because he's actually going along with an error that cropped up in around the 4th century due to Saint Jerome mistranslating that particular word when he was creating his Latin Vulgate translation. I think it's either the 4th or 5th century that Jerome did that. But essentially, the point being that the word "or," which is supposed to mean land or country, he mistranslates as fire. And then because he mistranslates it as fire, this myth of Abraham and the fire emerges. And interestingly enough, that's what appears in the Quran. So in other words, Muhammad goes along with the error instead of correcting it. An example of prophethood, in some sense, would have been if Muhammad had known that and had corrected it in his text. Um, then there would be more. Then there'd be a better argument to make for his prophethood. But instead, he doesn't do that. Instead, what Muhammad does is he actually goes along with the error. Okay, which for me is a clear indication or example that he was not a prophet. Okay, in other words, the one chance or the couple of chances or few chances that he has to demonstrate prophethood, um, within the context of this supposed revelation he received from God, he falls short every time. He does I don't even know what to call it, but he basically trips over himself essentially, um, and that's a clear indication. We're about to see another one here. And I'll explain what would have been cool if Muhammad had produced something else here in a second. But he obviously doesn't produce that. But had he produced that, again, same situation, like the one with Abraham and Ur and the fire thing. Um, if Muhammad had corrected this at his time, it would have been, again, it would have added a lot of validity to this claim to prophethood that he came out with. Um, Okay, just give me 1 second here. Um, okay, so let's go through it. So what do we have here? So it says the child Ishmael grew up and learnt Arabic from them, and his virtues caused them to love and admire him as he grew up. And when he reached the age of puberty, they made him marry a woman from amongst them. So again, what's being claimed here by this particular hadith? Now, just for those who are wondering, this is Sahih grade hadith. So this is, if you're a Sunni Muslim, you have to accept Sahih grade. It's as simple as that. It's part of your Sunnah. Okay. Um, it's saying here that Ishmael, the son of Abraham, okay, that he grew up speaking Arabic. Okay. The problem with that claim, historically speaking, and why this is rejected by linguists, and we'll get into that in a second, is simply due to the fact that Ishmael would have lived around 1800 BC. As far as the whole area of Mesopotamia is concerned, ancient Mesopotamia is concerned, uh, given the region attributed to both Abraham, um, and Ishmael and Isaac and that entire family branch, the most prominent language at that time, for that region, for both of them, would have been Akkadian. Okay, so that's why if you ask a linguist who's familiar with ancient Mesopotamia and the languages in ancient Mesopotamia, they will tell you, yes, if this is the period that Abraham lived in around 1800 BC, which is the period that's attributed to him, they would say, yes, Akkadian is the language he would have spoke. And that's simple deduction. Okay. Um, And the problem with this claim is the fact that it's attributing to Ishmael a language which ironically didn't exist at that time. Arabic doesn't come until way, way later. Okay, way, way later. Okay, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Um, so there's a book by his name is Ahmed Al Jalad, and I want you guys to listen to the name of this book. Okay, it's called The Earliest Stages of Arabic, and it's a linguistic classification. So again, the earliest stages of Arabic. So in the context of this particular book, he's going through the earliest stages of the Arabic language until it becomes what it becomes much later on. Okay? And what he points out is that Arabic, along the lines, right, of what Muhammad would have spoke in both Mecca and Medina at his time, doesn't come into existence until around the 3rd century, 4th century AD. Okay, and that would have been sort of the earliest precursor, okay, to the form of Arabic that was spoken at that time. Okay, once you get before the BC period, and essentially forget about it, there was no Arabic to speak of. Okay, so when you go back to the time of Ishmael around 1800 BC, the point here being that there was no Arabic. Arabic didn't exist in any shape or form. The most prominent language, right, which is the language that linguists would attribute to both Ishmael and Abraham, is Akkadian. Okay, but yet Muhammad seems to think that Ishmael spoke Arabic. He creates this, he kind of invents this story for which, again, at the time you can get away with it, okay, because people didn't know better. They didn't have a way of checking these things, okay? But we have a whole field of linguistics, right, where people have gone through all the evidence, okay, and they've used deduction to come to the best understanding, okay, um, of what language would have been spoken at this time, okay, and based on all the evidence we have, it's Akkadian, okay. So that's why if you ask a linguist who's familiar with ancient Mesopotamia as well as the area that's attributed to both Ishmael and Abraham, they'll tell you straight out, yeah, it would have been Akkadian, would have been the language, that would have been their lingua franca. However, they would tell you if you came to them and said, okay, but this hadith here says that they spoke Arabic. Well, their reply to that would be that's an ahistorical claim because Arabic didn't exist in any shape or form at that time. And this is my point. Okay. Now, what would have been interesting is if Muhammad had put in this particular hadith Akkadian instead of Arabic. If he had said Ishmael grew up and learned Akkadian, that would have been a phenomenal claim because that's something we wouldn't expect him to know, because that's not something that became known until much, much later. Okay. Had Muhammad said that, then the dynamic of this claim would have been far, far different. And we'd have something to work with. Okay. We'd have a little sort of indicator of prophethood. But well, you if you want, you can come on. But it's again, if you're saying it's from ignorance, then here's the problem. Okay. Believe it or not, I actually provided a source. Okay. So the source I provided is by Ahmed Al Jalad. Okay. Who's an Arabic speaking linguist. Okay. Credible linguist. Okay. And he wrote a book. Okay. And the name of his research or book is The Earliest Stages of Arabic and Its Linguistic Classification. I'm going to put the name of the book in the chat. Credible linguist work, right? Linguistic work. And within that, he says Arabic didn't exist at the time of Ishmael. Okay. So again, what I'm trying to tell you is that I'm not even going by my own subjective viewpoint here. I'm relaying to you guys what the experts actually say about this. And academia agrees, okay, within the field of linguistics, that again, similar to other claims in the Quran, this is an ahistorical claim, okay? Because Abraham and Ishmael, in that specific region, at that specific time, around 1800 BC, the most prominent language was Akkadian, not Arabic, okay? What I'm saying, and what I'm trying to get to here, is that if Muhammad had put in here Akkadian, that was the language that he learned growing up and spoke, whatever, that would have been a phenomenal claim because that's something we wouldn't expect Muhammad to know. However, Instead of doing something that would have been an indicator of his prophethood, he actually does the opposite and he shoots himself in the foot. He claims that Ishmael spoke a language that didn't exist at that time, right, in that region. So he gets it wrong. He makes an ahistorical claim. Okay? And this is the point. Whenever Muhammad has an opportunity to prove his prophethood, he does the opposite. He disproves it. Okay? And that's based on the contemporary evidence that we have today. Okay? Unless, okay, Islamic defender Yahya, unless you want to, say that academia is completely wrong, right? And their approach is completely wrong in how they determine, as professional linguists, okay, the emergence of a specific language at a specific time. Okay? Because that's the credible works that they've produced. And I'm going to, just so you can look into this yourself, I'm actually going to provide you with the name of the work. So it's called, hold on, and I want you to look this up in your own time. Because even, like, I'm providing you with, like, this is the thing, right? I'm providing you with an Arabic speaking linguist who's credible and wrote a credible work on this. Okay? And he's in full agreement that this is an ahistorical claim on the part of Muhammad. Okay? That Muhammad gets it wrong. Okay? Had Muhammad said Akkadian, would have been phenomenal. It would have been an indication of prophethood. But as I argued from the start of this stream, whenever Muhammad has the opportunity to prove his prophethood, he shoots himself in the foot. Okay? And we're going to get into some other ahistorical claims he makes a little later. I'm just going to type in this work. But what I want you to do is, I want you to look into it and read it. Because if you don't want to take it from me, take it from a credible academic source. Because you see, unlike Muslims, generally speaking, when I ask you guys for evidence and you produce none, when I make claims like this, I actually have evidence from academics, credible academics who've done the research and done the work. Okay? And this is also part of why I believe Islam is essentially a total kind of blind faith-based religion. I don't think there's any room within Islam to actually think rationally about things and to base things off evidence. You just have to base things purely off what the Quran says. So the entire logic within Islam is circular reasoning. That's how it works. That's why, if I'm not mistaken, you guys believe logic itself in some sense is haram, right? Okay, Arabic and its linguistic classification. Now, as I said, this source that I'm putting in, I want you to look into it in your own time. Please, you're free to come on stream as well if you want to speak. I have no problem welcoming you on stream. The link is there for anyone who wants to join, and we can go through whatever we need to go through. None could bring a chapter. You see, you're deflecting from what I just said. Okay, what I just said is academia at large is in agreement that this is a historical claim, that Muhammad gets it wrong. And it's not just here, it's in a number of other places. Okay, so address that. Okay, and by the way, if you want to argue, okay, that there's nothing like the Quran, right, what on earth does that even mean? Okay, because yeah, well then come on stream then. Come on stream and discuss. Because I could just make the argument, as someone who's gone through the Quran, it would be very easy to produce something similar to the Quran, if not better. Because the Quran is, from my perspective, one of the worst written texts I've ever read. Okay? Like, it's so baseless and shallow, and it doesn't read well. Okay? It's all over the place. So I don't understand what the actual argument there is, that produce a verse like it. In what sense produce a verse like it? Because we have literature today that is infinitely better than the Quran. Okay, look, fair enough. I'm not going to press you to come on if you don't want to come on. That's your choice, bro, dude. But it would be nice, if you want to argue your points. I don't hate it. My argument is that if the Quran could prove itself, I would gladly accept it. What I'm saying is, every chance the Quran has to prove itself, it shoots itself in the foot and it disproves itself. So, for example, the Muslim claim that it's the greatest literary work ever produced. No, it's not. as someone who's read a ton of literature, when I read the Quran, I regard it as one of the worst written texts ever produced. Okay, like there's it's absolutely painful to have to slog through it. And not only that, the stuff that the Quran references. So, like for example, much of what's in the Quran is taken from Gnostic sources and apocryphal works from the first century CE period up until the time of Muhammad. It's actually nothing, generally speaking, from the BC period. And the stuff that it's drawing from is actually infinitely more interesting and infinitely deeper than the Quran itself, which is bizarre. Okay, if the Quran was actually, a well-written text, as opposed to this kind of trashy sort of hodgepodge text that Muhammad put together from all these different sources, which don't even fit, by the way, you'd have a completely different argument, and you could argue that point. But the argument stands currently. What you guys call the Quran is not a well-written text. Okay, it's a very poorly written text that's extremely shallow and baseless. And that doesn't come across to me as a text from Allah. That to me actually comes across as a text written by an ummi. Like that's how it reads, which is the irony of it. Okay, so let me provide you with this source and its linguistic classification. Yeah. Again, there's an academic source. Read it in your own time, go through it, and you'll see his argument. Okay, his argument is that this specific claim on the part of Muhammad is completely ahistorical. And we're going to go to another one. I want to show you chapter 10, Quran 10, verse 19. And this is the so-called famous drowning of Pharaoh. And we're going to share this. Okay. So this is the claim in the Quran that the Pharaoh drowned. Okay. And I'm going to show you something very interesting from actual historical sources in a minute by Egyptologists. Okay. But basically, the Quranic claim, and it's in Ibn Kathir's tafsir, he goes into detail about this, is that the Pharaoh at the time of Moses drowned. Okay. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with this. Okay. Similar to the claim about, Ishmael speaking Arabic. None of the pharaohs from the 18th and 19th dynastic period drowned. And the reason we know that is because we have their physical remains, because they were mummified. And I'm going to provide you, and again, I'd be interested to see how you respond to this as a Muslim. Are you going to go down the route where you're going to say, well, I just believe it because the Quran says so in spite of all the evidence? Or are you actually going to perhaps be somewhat proactive here and consider, okay, if the Quran is getting things wrong, historically speaking, what does that mean about Muhammad's claim to prophethood? Okay. And this is the sort of point I was trying to establish at the very start. Okay. Every time Muhammad has an opportunity to demonstrate his prophethood or prove his prophethood, he disproves it because he gets details wrong, historically speaking. It doesn't make sense, for example, someone who claims to have divine revelation is also ignorant of basic historical facts and is getting them completely wrong. Okay. So, just for context here, I'm just going to provide a couple of sources. Okay. You have so I'm giving you a name, the names of a couple of reputable Egyptologists. So one example is James K. Hoffmeyer, and he wrote a book called Israel in Egypt. Okay. And he deals with the Exodus narrative. Okay. And this is, again, credible Egyptologists. Pharaoh did not drown. Okay. So just for context, I'll just let you know what happened with that specific Pharaoh, okay? According to Egyptology, the Pharaoh in question, okay, he died from old age. He lived till roughly 90, okay? So that's James K. Hoffmeyer. Then we have Peter Feynman, another Egyptologist, okay? And he wrote a book called The Exodus, an Egyptian Story. And within the context of that, same conclusion, the Pharaoh did not drown, okay? Then Bob Brier has an entire lecture series on this. Another credible Egyptologist. What does he say? Exactly the same thing. Pharaoh did not drown. Okay. And then you have, again, for example, if you want a contemporary example, Dr. David A. Falk. Okay. He has an entire video on this, and we can maybe delve into this a little later. Again, expert Egyptologist. What's he say? The Pharaoh did not drown, but your Quran claims he drowned. Muhammad seems to believe that he drowned. Okay. So this is the sort of stuff I'm getting at, okay? Why on earth, Islamic defender Yahya, can you please explain to me, right? Is Muhammad getting historical details wrong? Okay? And I want an answer from you. I don't want you to run to some other verse or run to some other thing. I just want you to give me a direct answer, okay? Every time Muhammad has the opportunity to demonstrate his prophethood, right? Why does he get historical details wrong? Right? Why does he not know what happened at these specific times and places, okay? Why is he completely in error in the conclusions that he's drawing based on the evidence that we have today? Now, I can give you my answer. My answer is that this is all part of the narrative that he was spinning and making up, because at that time, people had no way of checking the stuff. Like, in other words, what I'm saying is, if Muhammad lived today and he was coming out with the stuff that he came out with back then, he would be completely rejected as sort of something akin to those people who believe in alien spaceships. Okay? Because what people would say to him today is a very simple thing. They just say, provide us with your evidence. And then he'd sit there saying, Allah's my evidence. But then they say, no. Give us actual, tangible, historical evidence that these things happen. And he'd just say, well, Allah's my evidence. Again, circular reasoning, right? Self-affirmation, okay? Special pleading, whatever you want to call it. However, if you have sources to the contrary, I'd be more than happy to accept them, okay? So what do you do with this Islamic defender Yahya? Can you explain to me? Well, what do you do with something like this? When Muhammad's getting historical data incorrect and he's making errors. He's, as I said, I gave you the example. That's not what that says. But besides, you didn't answer my question. You did exactly the thing that I told you not to do, which is you ran to something that had nothing to do with what I was asking you. My question is, okay, and I want you to answer this, okay? Why is Muhammad getting historical details wrong? Okay? Can you answer my question, please, as opposed to running to other stuff that's irrelevant to my question? My question is why is Muhammad getting historical details wrong? If you don't have an answer, that's okay. Okay, just say I don't know. Just say, yeah, he's getting it wrong according to historians and Egyptologists and linguists and academia. And I don't know why that is, but like, what's your answer to that? What's your answer to him believing the pharaoh drowned when Egyptologists disagree with him and are calling this a ahistorical claim, just like the claim with Ishmael speaking Arabic? I'm trying to show you. Okay, well, bring the evidence then. Okay, so why is Muhammad getting this wrong? Chapter 10, verse 90. Why is he in error here? Why is he making a mistake? Because remember, you claim that these are Allah's words, right? If they're Allah's words, how can they have errors? Okay, this is a historical error. So is Allah wrong? And if so, why is Allah wrong? Yeah, that's my point. We do have evidence to prove it. And you know what the evidence to prove it is? And I just gave you a ton of names and a ton of works produced by Egyptologists. The evidence to prove it is we have their bodies. We have their physical remains. Because these pharaohs, they were mummified from the 18th and 19th dynastic period. So when forensics analyzed the bodies of these pharaohs, they saw that none of them drowned. But Muhammad claims they drowned. You see, this is what I'm saying. Muhammad was safe at the time because there was no forensics back in 7th century Arabia to go and check these bodies, right? So answer the question, please. So why is Muhammad getting chapter 10 verse 90 incorrect? Why is he making a historical error? As I said, science has proven that these pharaohs did not drown, but Muhammad's saying they did. So who's right? The forensics and the scientists who've analyzed the bodies with the most modern technology that we have, and they can say conclusively that none of these pharaohs drowned, or is Muhammad right, even though Muhammad doesn't have any evidence for what he's saying? As I said, according to modern science and modern Egyptology, this is a historical error on the part of the Quran. Okay, thank you. At least I appreciate that. So what I'm going to ask you then is, and I want an answer to this, okay? If Muhammad is making errors in the Quran and getting stuff wrong, historically speaking, why are you still a Muslim? Okay? So I gave you the example of the Hadith, okay? He says Ishmael spoke Arabic. We know that's not the case. Okay, it's rejected by linguists, okay? That's regarded as a historical claim. We then have this claim here that the Pharaoh drowned, okay? Modern Egyptology and modern science disagrees and says Muhammad got it wrong, okay? I'm going to show you another claim in a moment where Muhammad said there was a Samaritan at the time of Moses, which is also incorrect. It's chapter 20, verse 85. So the question that I'm asking you is, and again, we could look at the crucifixion in Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. Every time Muhammad has an opportunity, right, to prove, but you're submitting to a God who's ignorant and can't get basic historical events correct. Like, why are you submitting to a God who doesn't know basic history? Can you answer that? Islamic defender Yahya. Why are you submitting to a God who's getting historical data wrong, who's making historical errors, who doesn't know basic history, who's ignorant of basic history? Why are you submitting to that God? Because to me, the God of the Quran, I'll just try and spell it out for you. I'll just try and spell it out for you, okay? The only type of person that would make these errors that are in the Quran is an ummi, meaning the author of the Quran is an ummi. Because how on earth, right, does he not know that the Pharaoh didn't drown? Okay, how is he getting that wrong? And why are you submitting to the author of this text when he's making historical errors? He's making mistakes. Because isn't your claim that this is Allah's speech? Isn't Allah's speech supposed to be perfect? So how is Allah getting stuff wrong? No, answer my question, Islamic defender Yahya. Don't run from the question. The question's very simple, okay? Why is the author of the Quran getting details wrong? Why is he making mistakes when he's trying to tell us about history? Can you provide an answer for that? Okay, because isn't your claim that he knows all things? So if he knows all things, how is he getting historical details wrong? Like this example here with Pharaoh. Like this claim is enough for me to never consider Islam. This claim is enough for me to say Islam is invalid as a religion. This one claim here in the Quran, and it's only one example. I have many more. But the fact that your God doesn't know basic history and is getting basic history wrong is enough for me to know that the God of the Quran isn't God at all. It's just an Ummi author. So can you explain this? Who? Prove. Give me the source. Don't quote. Okay. If you're gonna the Bukhari French doctor guy. Okay. He's a fraud. So I hope you're not going to quote the Bukhari French doctor guy. But provide me, yeah, please. I'll wait for it. Provide us with the evidence that isn't fraudulent. That's a credible source that proves this. Because I gave you names, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to match me name for name, okay? James K. Hofmeister, right? Peter F. Feynman, okay? Bob Breyer, David A. Falk. So I'll go through their sources and then you come back with your sources, okay? So I'm giving you 4 names. You give me 4, okay? So James K. Hofmeister, his book is called Israel in Egypt, Pharaoh Didn't Drown. Peter Feynman, The Exodus, an Egyptian story, Pharaoh Didn't Drown. Bob Breyer, Egyptologist, has an entire lecture series on this, Pharaoh Didn't Drown. David A. Falk, again, has an entire video on this, Pharaoh Didn't Drown. Okay? I'm giving you 4 examples of 4 credible Egyptologists. Okay? Provide me with your sources. So, dude, wait, hold on. See what you just did there? You made up a source to try and prove a point. I mean, how deceptive is that? Is that the Islamic way? Is that what you're inviting people into? Is a deceptive religion where you try and deceive people? And then when you find out that someone like me knows better, then you abandon it? But look at what you also said. As I believe Quran regardless. That means that it doesn't matter the evidence that someone shows you. You're so blinded and you're so deceived by the God of the Quran, right, who I believe is Muhammad, Okay, you're so deceived by that you won't even listen to reason, or you won't even listen to the facts. You won't even listen to the data. You're just going to ignore it, even when all the data tells you the Quran is wrong. No, you said, hold on, we have your claim in the chat, my friend. Now you're lying. You said it's your claim. Again, I'm going to read out your comment. Okay, this is your comment. You said it's your claim that it's false while you rely on Egyptian scholars. As I know, German scientists prove he was drowned. Who's the German scientist? Okay. No, I want you to provide evidence, actual sources, actual credible sources. That's what I've done so far. I've been honest and fair with you. I read out names of credible sources. Okay. I came prepared, my friend. Okay. So far, you came up with stuff and you've just tried to be deceptive. You haven't produced a single source. I know that your God, according to the Quran, is the best of deceivers, and I know that that's the example that you're being led by. Okay, but I'm trying to be engaged with you here in an honest way, and the way that I've done that so far is I've provided actual sources to back up my claims. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. At least you're willing to acknowledge that. Okay, and this is part of my issue with the Quran. And this is actually I'm gonna spin this back to you, okay? What I'm gonna say is this, okay? Okay. What I'm gonna say is this, okay? So you said I need to search and this will take time as I'm not prepared like you. My question to you then is why do you accept the Quran and Muhammad when you haven't even done the research? Is it just because you were born into the religion? Is that the only reason you became a Muslim? Is because you were born into it? Because you just proved in the chat that you don't know enough. Okay, that you haven't done the research, you haven't done the study. If you haven't done the research and you haven't done the study, how can you be convinced of it? Right? Because here's the thing, when I did the research and I did the study into the Quran and the Hadith, it proved to me that Muhammad was a liar. It proved to me that the God of the Quran doesn't know what they're talking about. They're just making stuff up. Okay, they're getting stuff wrong, they're making mistakes. And I can't trust in something like that has so many errors in it. Okay, that's that's a conclusion I came to based on the study, based on doing, as I said, it's credible scholarship, like looking into the different sources. Okay, and that's what I'm saying. This is what I'm asking you. Okay, so if you know that you haven't done enough research and you haven't done enough study, why are you a Muslim? Okay, because you're committing to a religion that you know nothing about. So why would you do that? Can you answer my question, please? I'm asking you about the Quran. There's no point in running to the Bible, okay? I'm asking you about the Quran and I'm asking you about Muhammad, okay? My claim to you is this, okay? If you know that you don't know enough and you haven't done enough study and you haven't done enough research, why are you a Muslim? Okay? Because all the evidence within the Quran and the Hadith points to the fact that the Quran is not from God. I'm not talking about my religion. Again, don't use my religion, right, as something to hide behind to defend your own religion. I'm asking you about your religion. I'm asking you, why are you a Muslim when all the evidence tells you the Quran is wrong, that Muhammad is a liar, and that the God of the Quran is ignorant and made mistakes and doesn't know what they're talking about? So why are you a Muslim when all the evidence tells you you shouldn't be? Okay, okay. But if the Quran is from God, then prove it, okay? This is, again, you don't prove the Quran by the Quran itself, okay? You prove the Quran by stacking it up against evidence, okay? And this is the point I was trying to make to you, okay? How can you say, okay, I'll frame the question like this, okay? This is my question to you. How can you say the Quran is from God if the Quran is getting stuff wrong, if the Quran is making mistakes? You would agree with me that God doesn't make mistakes, okay? So why are you a Muslim when the Quran makes mistakes? You're trying to hide behind the Bible, my friend. I'm asking you about the Quran. Forget about my position. I'm asking you about your position, okay? Why are you a Muslim if the Quran makes mistakes? It's a simple question. Okay? And I've proven it to you. I've only given you a couple of examples. I have many more. Okay? So if the Quran is false, as you said, and the Quran makes mistakes, why are you a Muslim? Why not look to something else? It's a simple question, my friend. Okay? If Muhammad is a liar and is wrong, which all the evidence points towards, and if the Quran is wrong, okay, and the Quran makes mistakes, why are you a Muslim? It's not okay, here's the point, okay? It's not my view. It's academia's view. I just gave you examples, okay? So let's see if it's my view. James K. Hoffmeyer, okay? Credible Egyptologist, credible scholar. Quran is wrong, makes a mistake. Peter Feynman, okay? Egyptologist, okay? Credible scholar. Quran makes a mistake. Bob Breyer, okay? Credible Egyptologist, credible scholar. The Quran makes a mistake. So you see where I'm going with this, right? David A. Falk, okay? Credible scholar, credible Egyptologist. The Quran makes a mistake. Again, this is not my view, okay? When it comes to chapter 20, verse 85, okay? Andrew Tobolsky, who's a credible archaeologist, says the Quran makes another error, right? By claiming that there was a Samaritan at the time of Moses, okay? And I'm going to provide you with some more, okay? So there's no point in you saying, my friend, with all due respect, okay? There's no point in saying it's my view, okay? When I'm pointing out to you that this is the view of academia at large, okay? It's academia that's saying this. I'm not just making this up. I'm telling you that this is what academia believes about the Quran. Unless you want to claim that all the scholars, okay, all of them are wrong and the Quran is right because the Quran says so. But if that's your logic, then what you're admitting is that Islam is a circular, blind religion that cannot be proven, and you just have to believe everything by faith and only faith. Okay? You can't go outside the remit of faith. You can't use logic. You can't use rationale. You just accept everything blindly. Okay? Again, that's a blind faith. That's all that is. That means there's nothing in the Quran that's evidence-based. Okay? Some other scholars, okay? Bart Ehrman believes the Quran, okay, is wrong and makes mistakes. And this is when he talks about the crucifixion of Jesus, Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. He says there's an error, okay? James D.G. John, the Quran is wrong. Again, another credible historian scholar. John Dominic Crossan, credible scholar. Quran is wrong, okay? James P. Meyer, credible scholar. Quran is wrong, okay? So you see where I'm going with this, right? You can tell this isn't my view. I came to this conclusion based on looking at the evidence, okay? All the evidence and all the scholars are in agreement as far as the credible historians, the credible Egyptologists, the credible archaeologists, okay? They're all in agreement the Quran makes historical errors and it makes mistakes. So if the Quran is making mistakes, again, this isn't my view, so don't pin it on me. This is what the scholars are saying that your Quran is wrong based on the evidence and makes mistakes. Why are you a Muslim if you know your Quran makes mistakes? So can you answer my question? Why are you a Muslim when so many scholars agree your Quran makes mistakes? It's okay. You can take your time to think of the answer. So wait. Before we move on to the other thing, okay? Are you admitting, okay? Are you admitting that your Quran is wrong and that it makes mistakes? Are you admitting that? Let me just see. So are you admitting that then, that your Quran makes mistakes and has errors in it? And if so, why are you still a Muslim? So in other words, okay, let's explore your logic here then. So in other words, you believe the Quran and you trust the Quran even when all the evidence is put in front of you and tells you your Quran is wrong. Do you not see the issue with that? Again, I'll repeat my argument, okay? What you're saying is you believe the Quran and you trust the Quran even when all the evidence is put in front of you and proves the Quran is wrong. And you're telling me you don't see an issue in that. Does that not look like deception to you, my friend, that you've been deceived? That you've been brainwashed? That Islam is essentially a controlling cult? You don't see it? What's your answer to that? So you're willing to believe in a text and believe in a book that has mistakes and is proven wrong. Though they don't prove anything, and you didn't even address the ones that I brought up. They don't prove anything, and you didn't even address the ones I brought up. So again, this is the argument. If the Quran is from God, it should be free from error. Okay? Why is it that the scholars agree your Quran has errors in it? All the scholars. I gave you a ton of names and you heard me name the names. Okay? You heard me name the scholars. Okay? And they all agree your Quran is wrong and makes mistakes. Okay? What I'm saying to you is if you know this, okay, why are you still a Muslim? And you said, regardless of what the scholars say, I will trust the Quran no matter what. Again, you don't see the problem with that line of thinking? You don't see the issue with that form of reasoning? Can you answer my question, please? When the Quran has mistakes in it, and you know there's mistakes in it, why are you still a Muslim? Because your premise is that your God knows everything, right? If he knows everything, how is he making mistakes? Can you answer my question, please? Okay? If your Quran has mistakes and you know it has mistakes, and I gave you examples, okay, I have many more, but I just gave you a few, okay? Why are you still a Muslim? Okay? Because you believe, for example, that your God knows everything. If your God knows everything, how is he getting stuff wrong? How is he making mistakes? Okay? So, for example, we just went through chapter 10, verse 90. And I brought this up to you before. Don't run to another verse. Address what's in front of you. Okay? My argument, by the way, isn't that everything in the Quran is wrong. I look, there's probably some stuff in there that's correct. But the issue is that it has errors and it has mistakes. So for the stuff that's incorrect, there's stuff that's correct. For the stuff that's correct, there's stuff that's incorrect. Okay? This is the point, okay? If your God knows everything, and it's the word of God, it's the word of Allah, right? It's kalam Allah, as you would say, right? Isn't it supposed to be true? Isn't it supposed to be fully correct? It's supposed to be free from error. Okay? If it has errors in it and it has mistakes, like chapter 10, verse 90, like chapter 20, verse 85, like Surah Al Nisa, verse 157, okay? If it has errors like that, and the hadith we looked at with Ishmael speaking Arabic, for example, if it has all these errors and mistakes, okay, why are you a Muslim? Can you answer my question? If your Quran has mistakes, why are you a Muslim? It's a simple question. Again, I'm trying to have a direct conversation with you. I'm not asking you to manifest by going to a million other things that have nothing to do with what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, why does the Quran have mistakes? Okay? If it's from God, why does it have mistakes? And why do you believe in it if it has mistakes? If the premise is that it's Kalam Allah? It's a simple question. Take all the time you need to think of an answer. Okay? Well, okay. At least you're being honest, okay? I don't know why Islam gives you peace in your heart, but that's besides the point, okay? But at least you're being honest, okay? What I'm saying is, okay, follow my line of reasoning here, okay? The Quran has mistakes, okay, based on the evidence that we have today. It has clear mistakes, okay? That refutes the claim that the Quran is Kalam Allah. Because if the Quran is Kalam Allah, it should not have a single mistake in it. Okay? The fact that it has mistakes proves that it's not Kalam Allah. Doesn't matter if it gets something right over here, something right over there. The fact is, over here and over there, there's mistakes. Okay? And the fact that there's mistakes proves it's not Kalam Allah. And if it's not Kalam Allah, then why are you a Muslim? Okay? So your line of reasoning is, well, it gives me peace. So in other words, what you're saying is, I'll follow a false religion, right? Because it pleases me. It gives me pleasure. That's not the point of following God or following a religion. It's not about you. It's about God. And you just proved your sole reason for being a Muslim is because for you, it's about you. It's not about Allah, it's about you. Okay? Like, you have to open up your mind, my friend. You have to think more about what you're saying, okay? Because you just proved that for you, being a Muslim is about you. It's not about Allah. And if that's the case, why on earth are you a part of that? Okay? If you want to be part of a religion that satisfies you and gives you pleasure, that's fine. Okay? Do that. Right? But on the day of judgment, you're going to be in a sorry state when you stand before God. Okay? And check the mistakes. Okay? I gave you the sources. I didn't just sit here and tell you something and not back it up with evidence. I backed up everything I said with evidence. Okay? And it's something you need to seriously think about. But dude, you didn't hear what you completely ignored everything that I said. Okay? I just told you, right? How can it touch your heart and your mind when you know there's errors in it and it makes mistakes? Should that not be the first kind of red flag that this is not from Allah? If there's clear errors in it, there's clear mistakes. What do you think? If there's clear errors and there's clear mistakes, and I just gave you one example, there's plenty more, okay? Why would you subscribe to this? So wait, hold on. This isn't my claim. Okay? This is the claim of scholars and academics. Okay? This is what scholars are saying based on the evidence. I'm not making this up. Okay? Don't frame it like that because you're trying to be deceptive here. You're trying to be a liar. Okay? You're saying that I'm just claiming this. I'm not just claiming this. This is what scholars have said, and I gave the names. I gave the evidence. Yeah, you see, this is my point. You're blinded. You're blinded by your love for a religion that satisfies you. Because as I said, it's about you and the pleasure that you get. Okay? It has nothing to do with God. It's a self-centered religion. The Islam is one of the prime examples of a religion that has a complete absence of God in it. It's all about you. You are the main character in Islam. Okay? And that's the problem right there. That's an ego-centered religion. And an ego-centered religion can be from no one other than Satan himself. Okay? So the spirit of Islam is very clear in terms of where it's coming from. It ain't coming from God, it's coming from Satan. Because only Satan would allow for a religion that's ego-centered. Okay? So you're proving the point. So you trust in Allah's words even when they're wrong and he makes mistakes? Going by your logic now. You trust in Allah when he makes mistakes and he makes errors and he gets things wrong. Explain that to me. Why do you trust in Allah when he makes mistakes? No, that's not the point. Satan would deceive you to this. You're just proving the point. The thing is, Satan will deceive you and confuse you to the point where you won't be able to tell the difference between good and bad. And you've already proven that up until now. Okay? You said the reason you're a Muslim is because it gives you peace. It's about you. It's ego-centered. It's self-centered. That's a satanic religion. Okay? because that's Satan's main premise. That's the main thing he looks to, is his ego. Okay? And that's the spirit that he's led by. And that's the spirit he wants his followers to adopt. He wants them to be ego-centered. Okay? And you've already proven that. Okay? So this is my point. Okay? And what I'm saying to you is, okay, and you haven't answered the question. You said you trust in Allah, you trust in Allah's words, okay? Okay, okay, you can. I'll give you 10 minutes and you can come on. I'll look at something else while I'm waiting for you. You can take your time, okay? Let's look at Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157. So Quran 4:157. One of my favorite Quranic verses. Okay. And let me just change to this tab over here. I'm gonna just get some other stuff up while we're waiting for our guest to join. Okay. I just want to check one thing first, just out of curiosity. And then there's one other thing I just want to get ready here. It's this one here. And then there's one other thing I want to get up. It's another Quranic verse that I want us to look at. Okay. And then there's one other verse. Where is it? Okay. Hold on, guys. I'm just looking for. There's one more Quranic verse I just want to get up here. Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. So, I'll just quickly go through this while we're waiting for our guest to join. But essentially, Surah An-Nisa, verse 157, the premise here is that what Muhammad's essentially saying is that Christ was not crucified, but that it was just made to appear unto them that he had been. Now, the thing is, there's a number of issues historically with this particular verse, and I want to bring up another Quranic verse as well, just to have here. I think it's this one. Okay. Um, okay. So, as you can see here, what does it say? We killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the messenger of Allah, but they neither killed nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so. Even those who argue for this crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. The Quran, in this particular context, is claiming something that's very bizarre, in the sense that, and this would be my part of my argument here as to why this is false. It's saying that the people who argue for the crucifixion are only making assumptions. The issue, however, is that the data that we have, today, all the sources that we have today lead historians to believe without a shadow of a doubt, with total certainty, that Christ was crucified. Okay, that's the universally accepted academic position on this. Okay, and this is what I'm trying to get at. Okay, I don't understand why, for example, okay, Muslims, Sunni Muslims, and by the way, I just want to point out something here. We don't specifically know exactly what Muhammad meant by this, okay? Because even within Islam, there's different schools of thought as to what may have happened at the crucifixion. One school of thought is that Jesus was on the cross. Okay, this is an Islamic position. Okay, that Jesus was on the cross. Allah preserved him on the cross, and then after the crucifixion, he raised him up to himself. That is a view that exists. Okay, and we can look at that a little later. Then you have, for example, okay, um, the fact that you have kind of what seems to be a later developed position, which is the one of substitution. This is the one that Ibn Kathir argues for in his tafsir on this verse. Okay, he seems to believe that the context of this particular verse is that Jesus essentially was substituted with somebody else. Okay, and this is a prevailing view that exists today, especially among Sunni Muslims. Okay, now there's some Sunni who actually don't agree with that position, that are leaning towards the one where he was on the cross, but Allah, preserved him on the cross and then raised him up to himself shortly thereafter. Okay, so there exist different viewpoints today as to what may have happened, but the most prevalent one is the substitution theory. The problem with the substitution theory is that if that's what Muhammad believed, then guess what? We know where he got it from. That was an invention by the Gnostics. Now, the Gnostics believe that Jesus didn't have a physical body. Okay? If that's the case, okay, and actually, I should have qualified that. The reason they believe he didn't have a physical body is because he was so holy and divine. Okay, that was why they believe that. But why on earth is he taking from that to try and find a workaround for the fact that Christ was crucified for the sake of humanity? Okay, you see what he's doing. Okay, Muhammad's trying to invent or to justify Christ not being crucified. Okay, so that he can negate the influence, okay, and the impact of what the cross means for followers of Christ, okay? Because remember, for the Christian believer, the cross symbolizes, at the time of Muhammad and before the time of Muhammad, the place where God himself offered his life up as a ransom for the sins of all of humanity, okay? And since it means that for them, he has to find a way to work around that. Okay, he has to find a story or a narrative that allows him to get away from that. Okay, and that's essentially what you have here. It seems as if, and this is, to be honest with you, this would be my perspective. I think the evidence would indicate that what Muhammad did was, as a workaround, he just ripped this particular theology from the Gnostics. He got it from the Gnostics, because we know, for example, that a huge amount of these Gnostic sects, as well as these apocryphal Jewish sects, did in fact migrate over to the Arabian Peninsula. Okay, and that's why, for example, almost every bit of material in the Quran that pertains to Jesus is actually taken from Gnostic sources and Gnostic traditions. So it's like, if that's the case, where did it come from? It didn't come from Allah, because it predates the Quran. So for example, Jesus playing with the clay pigeons. Where does that come from? Well, we have a gospel called the Infancy Gospel of Thomas. And in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, Jesus is playing with clay pigeons, okay? He breathes life into them and then they fly off. However, when these stories appear in the Quran, the major difference is that they appear in what we would call a redacted form, okay? They've been slightly altered or changed, okay? So in the context of that original story from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the author of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas views Jesus as divine, because every time Christ performs a miracle, okay, whether it be in the Bible or whether it be in the Gnostic sources, okay, the impression that the author is trying to give you, the reader, is that Christ is doing this innate of himself. And the reason they're doing that is because they want to lead you to believe that Christ is divine, okay, that he is in some sense God himself, okay. The Quran, whenever it kind of draws from these traditions and sources, okay, it always has to integrate or add into it a qualification, which is he does it by the permission of Allah. Okay, so the reason the author in the Quran is doing that, it's a polemic to let the reader know, at least from the Quran's perspective, that Jesus isn't divine. It's trying to remove the divinity from Christ. Because when you go back to the originals, the authors are very clear. They believe Jesus was divine, okay? This is another problem that the Quran has, okay? Because the argument can easily be made, based on all the sources that we have today, okay, that all these authors in either the Gnostic, the non-canonical or the canonical stuff, that the prevailing viewpoint among Jesus's followers was that he was God in some shape or form, okay? Now, the Quran obviously does a complete 180 on that through Muhammad's redaction, okay? But the issue is that it cannot be proven. It cannot be proven by evidence. I just want to see. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a verse in the Quran where it mentions Jesus' disciples. Just see if I can find this. There's a specific verse. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So this is Surah Al-Ma'idah, and we're going to 111. Let's skip down here, because I want to point something out. Actually, that's quite funny. And this is something else I want Muslims to understand as well. Okay, where is it? Oh yeah, here it is. Here it is. Okay. Share this tab instead. Oh, sorry, he's here now. Hello, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you. And what's our subject today?
We're just looking at well, for the time being, we're looking at different claims in the Quran to see if they can be historically verified. So the example I was giving earlier, let's go to chapter 10, verse 90. is this particular one. We can go to the Samaritan at the time of Moses in a minute, which is chapter 20, verse 85.
I
But
guess we
basically,
already talk about it, and to be honest, to go through it, if you have something else to talk about, I'm more than willing to talk about. So let's agree about subject and talk about, because I don't have a proof, as I mentioned to you, that and you rely on scholar, and I'm not able to bring any proof to refute that. And you claim that the Quran have a lot of mistakes.
Mhm.
So and the same way, if there's a lot of mistake in the Quran, we need to treat the Quran as we treat the Bible. If we find contradiction and something wrong in both of them, why would you believe in the Holy Bible, and I believe in the Holy Quran?
Well, this is my question about. This was the question I was asking about.
Is it is it is it possible you speak up a little bit, because I guess the voice
Oh,
is
my
little
apologies. Is
bit.
this better?
I guess it is a little bit better. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. I'll just speak a little louder then. So,
that's fine.
essentially, the point I was trying to make was when I look at this verse, chapter 10, verse 90, and I have other examples as well. But what I was saying was, if this is a clear historical error, okay, and the reason we know this is because we have academic works that were written by Egyptologists who look at the forensic evidence, because the bodies of the pharaohs from the 18th and 19th dynastic period were perfectly preserved because they were mummified. So forensics were able to analyze the bodies and they saw that none of them drowned. The problem is the Quran makes a very clear historical claim, which is that the Pharaoh at the time of Moses drowned, but we know he didn't because we have all the bodies of all the potential candidates. Now, the candidate that's put forward as the most likely Pharaoh for that time is Ramses II. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if this is a clear historical error on the basis of the Quran and on the basis of the evidence that we currently have today, why should I believe in this?
You don't have to believe, while you need to consider that the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that we will preserve the Pharaoh as it is to be a sign for the disbeliever. And this is confirming that when Moses fled with his people, they come and they split the sea, and they his people, his army, when they try to cross, they die. Besides, they didn't die in the sea, it was just on the shore. And this is I don't know those four scholars, the Egyptian scholar you mentioned, but regarding this by itself, it give you a confirmation that about the miracle which happened when Moses was surrounded and he didn't have any other way but to trust God, and this is how God inspired him to hit the sea with his stick, and the sea was open, and they were uh, uh, passed with safety. While when Pharaoh with his people run after them, God allows the sea to just drown all of them. And the Quran mentions that we will preserve the body of Pharaoh uh, exactly for other people as a sign of a truth. And I don't understand. You're talking about that they I don't know, they analyze his body, and uh, uh, you know I know that the Egyptian, they have already mummified a lot of their king, and through the years. And as I mentioned to you, I read about a German scholar, because the German and the English, they used to go and they do the investigation and Egypt, and they say that he was drowned and there was salt in his body. but still it preserved, and this is confirmed what the Quran talk about.
Okay, what's the name of the scholar?
Uh, I told you I don't know, and I'm trying to deceive you or to lie to you. I don't have the name of those scientists who done this, but regardless of this, you know, why don't you, you just now want to pick up on only this verse and the Quran?
No, no. My point is the point that I was making is that there is no German scholar that says that. I've looked
Uh,
into the evidence.
Fair enough.
Um,
Fair enough.
um,
I'm not
I,
gonna dispute that.
yeah, no, no. But I've looked into the evidence because I did provide you with names of Egyptologists
You
that do
did.
agree.
You
That
did.
do agree this is a historical error. I'm not making this up. This is the view within Egyptology. Um, and the point that I was making is that when I look at Ibn Kathir's tafsir on this particular verse, what he says is that as Pharaoh was drowning, okay, this is his claim, okay, as Pharaoh was drowning, Pharaoh tried to take his shahada, right? Gabriel comes out of nowhere, right, and shoves mud down Pharaoh's mouth and then forces him to die by drowning, okay? And then it says his body then was thrown up, okay, and it was preserved as a sign, okay, which is the thing you were talking about. What
Okay.
I'm saying is when forensics have analyzed Pharaoh's body, because I gave you the works, I gave you the examples by credible Egyptologists where they talk about the research that was done, they all agree that the thing that the Pharaoh died from was old age. There's no evidence of drowning. Because physically speaking, like I'll give you an example, okay? If I say to you, okay, this person down the road, they were shot in the head, okay?
Yeah.
Let's say they were shot in the head. You're in a lab, you're a forensics person, okay? You're looking at the body, okay? The
Yeah.
first thing you're going to look to is what? You're going to look for a head wound, okay? Because if someone shoots you in the head, there's going to be a bullet wound in your head, okay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. This is my point, okay? Now,
Uh,
if you went,
can I
let me
can I
finish my
respond
point.
to your
Let me
point?
1 sec. I'm not finished my point yet.
Please
What
do.
what I'm saying is that if you're a forensics person, okay, and then you look at his head and you see there's no bullet wound, okay, you're then going to say, okay, Adam was just making that up, okay, because
Okay.
I have the body here. I have the body here. There's no bullet wound. He's just making it up. Okay, he got it wrong. And this is the same situation with Pharaoh. Okay,
It's not a
forensics.
coincidence.
Okay,
You
forensics did
finish?
a no, no, almost. Forensics did an in-depth analysis of his entire body because it was perfectly preserved through mummification. Okay, and they determined that the determining cause in his death was old age. He died around the age of 90. Okay, that was conclusive in the context of when they looked at his body, they looked at his organs, they looked at his bones, they did an in-depth medical analysis of his body, and that was the conclusion they came to. That in and of itself is a complete contradiction to what the Quran says. Okay, so that's why Egyptologists, when they look at this particular verse, they'll say it's a historical error. They'll say Muhammad got it wrong. It's a historical mistake. So I don't know what you as a Muslim then do with that.
What I'm saying is, it's not a coincidence that as soon as Pharaoh follow Moses, he died exactly where he was catching up the Jew and Moses, peace be upon him. And you're saying he died in old age, and the preservation, as I mentioned, the preservation of not only Pharaoh, they discover a lot of tomb, and they have access to more than one. But why this in particular one? He just died exactly when he's following Moses and his people. Uh, I'm while I'm talking to you, to be honest, I'm trying to find something, but I'm not able. Uh,
Yeah, there's nothing there. I've checked.
yeah, fair enough. Okay,
I've done, look, I promise you, I've done my research. I gave you the names of the Egyptologists. I've tried to find stuff for this verse to back it up, and there's nothing there. It's
okay,
all stuff that says the opposite, that says that this claim is incorrect.
okay. Your second question is always uh, was why you are Muslim.
Yeah,
Yes.
what I'm asking is,
Uh,
okay, in the context.
your voice gone again very very low, and
Okay, my apologies. Is it better now?
it's better. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Uh,
I'll try and keep the mic as close as possible. But
please.
basically, what I'm saying is, yeah, this was my claim, okay, and I was trying to say this a little earlier, which is
Okay.
that you believe obviously that God knows everything, okay, God knows all things, okay, and you also believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the
Yeah.
Quran is Kalam Allah, right?
Yes. Yes. Of course.
Okay, so if it's Kalam Allah, it would be free from errors, right? It would be free from contradictions. It would be free from mistakes, okay.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yes.
and then on top of that, as far as Muhammad is concerned, when you look at I'm assuming you're Sunni Muslim, right?
I am.
So you believe in Sahih great hadith, right?
Uh, any Sahih hadith, if it contradicts the Quran, I reject it because hadith there's weak, there's fabricated, there's
Mm.
false, there's many,
Yeah, but
and because
what does Sahih great mean?
let me finish. Uh, Bukhari, he came 185 years after the Prophet death,
Hmm.
and he accumulate a lot of hadith, and then uh, this is why I'm saying the Quran is our scale regarding any hadith. So maybe I would reject some hadith as long as it contradicts with the Quran, and this is normal.
No, but what I'm saying is my understanding based on the Sunni Muslims that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of the Dawah guys from the Dawah channels, the big Dawah channels,
Okay.
they have told me that if the grade of the hadith, because there's different grades, there's Sahih, Hazan, Daif, for example, okay? They
Yes.
said if it's Sahih grade, we accept it without question. We don't question it. We accept it as words because of the chain of narration. This can be, we can say conclusively that this goes back to Muhammad. These are Muhammad's words, and because they're Muhammad's words, we don't question it. That's what they told
Okay.
me. Okay, if it's
Okay.
Sahih grade,
Okay.
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 So this hadith here, the one that I brought up about Ishmael speaking Arabic, this
Yeah.
is Sahih grade. So this is
Okay.
this is authentic to Muhammad. This goes back to the Muhammad. So the other thing is that if Muhammad is speaking as a prophet and he's making a prophetic claim, right? You
Yeah.
would agree with me that he can't make a mistake. He can't be in error, right? He wouldn't be making mistakes if he's claiming
Yeah.
something. Okay. This is my point. I don't understand then why on earth Muhammad is saying that Ishmael spoke Arabic when linguists agree that the Arabic language didn't exist at that time.
Now we are talking about the language. At the time of the Prophet, peace upon him, the Arab were well known for their elegant poem, and those people who can recite a poem, and they are were excellent in their Arabic.
Mhm.
While when the Quran came in the same language, but in a different linguistic form. The Prophet, peace upon him, you need to take in consideration that he lived among his people for 40 years, and he never claimed that he's a prophet or anything, but he was well known as a trustworthy. And when he uh, come to them and told them that he is a prophet, they turn against him, and they start to fight anybody accepted Islam, and try to kill them till after 13 years he fled to Medina.
Mhm.
I would like to talk about, like the Quran bring lot of proof, as I mentioned, and talk about lot of stuff. I would like to mention, like for
No, no, hold on,
example,
hold on, hold on.
I'm
My
holding on.
my question was specifically about this hadith. Okay.
Which
Uh,
hadith?
so this is Sahih al-Bukhari 3364. Okay. So
Okay.
this is Sahih great hadith. So this is authentic. This is reliable. The chain of narration goes back to Muhammad and it's authentic. Okay. So
Okay.
Muhammad actually said this. Okay. According to the Sunni tradition. Okay.
Okay.
What I don't understand is, and this was my original question. Okay. Why on earth is Muhammad saying that Ishmael spoke Arabic when Arabic didn't exist as a language back then? Because, for example, I did my master's in applied linguistics. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things we looked at was the development of languages. Okay,
Okay.
how languages develop across time. So languages go through a process called grammaticalization, where they become grammatically more developed across the centuries. So I'll give you one example. In the oldest form of German, there didn't exist a future tense. It wasn't until Middle German, about 700 years later, that they developed a future tense to help better express the future tense. Okay, this is what happens with languages. They develop across time, they become more advanced, let's just say. Okay, but we also can trace the different sources of where languages came from and how they developed from other languages. Okay,
Okay.
so
Can you,
my
as long
uh,
as you are expert on this, can you tell me how did the Arabic language evolve and become to contain almost 12 million word in it, root word?
yeah, so I provided earlier, I don't know if you saw in the chat, I provided a source, and this is by an Arabic scholar. Okay, and I'm recommending you read this. Okay, so this is by Al Jalad Ahmed. It's a 2018 work. It's a credible academic linguistic work from an Arabic speaking scholar. Okay,
Okay,
and it's called, no, listen to the title of the book. It's called The Earliest Stages of Arabic and Its Linguistic Classification. So
okay,
he goes through the entire development of the Arabic language from its
fair enough.
earliest form up until its present modern form. Okay?
Fair enough. Does it that mean that the Arabic language, which the Quran came up with, uh, does it give it a positive or negative aspect?
No, no, it's talking about when did the Arabic language come into existence and how did it develop. It's a linguistic work. So he points out, for example, the earliest form of Arabic, right, that was most similar to the Arabic spoken in Muhammad's time, didn't come into existence until around the 3rd century AD. Okay, and then up until the time of Muhammad, it developed further into what Muhammad spoke, and then obviously later what became modern Arabic. Okay, the point that I was trying to make is that Ishmael lived around 1800 BC, right, which is
Okay,
about 2,000 years before. Okay,
okay.
and if you go to a credible, and I'm actually I'm asking you to do this, go to a credible linguist and ask them what was the most prominent language spoken back at the time of Ishmael and the time of Abraham, back around 1800 BC, and they'll tell you it was Akkadian. Akkadian is one of the most ancient Semitic languages that existed that we know of today, okay? And they'll say that that was the most prominent language at that time in that region. So that's why if you ask them, they'll say Abraham and Ishmael would have spoke Akkadian. And then if you say to them, well, wait a minute, I have a hadith here where Muhammad said that Ishmael spoke Arabic, they'll tell you that can't be possible because Arabic didn't exist back then. That's what they'll say to you. And that's my
I'm,
claim. I don't
Look,
understand how Muhammad's getting that wrong.
I'm not going to dispute that because you know that Ibrahim, peace upon him, he came from Iraq, and Iraq from Ur, where is Babel, and the people of Babel, they, you know, you have the Ashuri, you have so many different tribes, and but this is and even you know, I don't want to talk about languages because I'm not an expert about languages, but even the Arabia, you know, people of Yemen, there used to be civilization over there, and Persian and all of the, and they spoke many different different languages, while the Arabic, if it derived from, let's say, Aramaic, we can say that only a few people left in Syria, pocket in Syria, a pocket in Iraq, who are Assyrian, and they can understand and talk. While from Yemen, the most Arabic speaker people came from Yemen, because Yemen, it used to be belongs to the Queen Sheba, Malikat Saba, and this is how it expand all around. The language. This is why I ask you, what's the negative aspect of the Arabic language. And as I mentioned, the Arabic language is an ocean of words. It contains, for example, if a lion, it have up to maybe 14 word for a lion. So the Arabic language is the top form of languages, regardless of its evolving through the years. But Prophet Muhammad, he came among his people, the Arab, which were they were very good and reciting by heart, poem, which you need the computer to manage it. And he came with a different form, unusual from the Arabic they spoke, and he challenged people to introduce first a verse like it, then 10 verses, then a chapter like it. And we are 1,448 years from the Prophet, and nobody can dispute or bring a chapter like the Quran. And the Quran, as I mentioned to you, Prophet Muhammad, he used to be an illiterate person who never write or read. He came with some verses only in the last 200 years with our advanced science and electric and macroscopic stuff. This it came to be true. He talked about it long time ago, and this is by itself. It's a miracle, and this is why. And
Wait, hold on.
yeah, I will
Wait,
hold on.
look, hold on. My issue is, again, you're going on a tangent to this other thing. I'm asking specifically about this hadith, okay? My question is why is Muhammad getting this wrong? Okay, like,
Uh,
I'll give you an example, and I said this at the very start. I don't know if you heard.
my
Okay,
dear,
my
what's your name, by the way? What's your name?
pardon,
Adam. Adam.
Adam. Yeah,
Adam.
my.
Why you concentrating on hadith while you have the Quran?
Oh
You
no,
don't have.
I look. We can go to
You
the. Wait,
don't
hold
trust the
on.
Quran.
No,
You
no, we
don't
can
trust the
go. We're
Quran.
gonna go
You
to the
have a
Quran in
doubt
a
about
second.
the
We're
Quran. You
going
have
to go.
doubt about hadith.
Hold on. Okay.
I'm holding on. Okay.
As a Sunni, okay, as a Sunni Muslim, okay, and I've spoken with many Sunni Muslims, okay, and I've gone on to Dawah channels and I've spoken with them, okay, and I told you at the very start, okay, for them, okay, it's Quran plus Sahih Great Hadith. They don't negate the Sahih Great Hadith, because I can give you an example in the Quran where you need the Hadith to explain it, because without it, it doesn't make sense, okay. And I can give you an example later of that, okay? That's why you have this entire tradition of these authentic words of Muhammad authenticating certain things in the Quran, because without it, they can't be authenticated, okay? That's why both are required within the Sunni tradition, okay? Now, again, we'll go to the Quran in a second, but what I'm saying is this specific hadith here has Muhammad saying that Ishmael spoke Arabic, okay? What I'm saying is linguists agree that that's not true. There was no Arabic at the time of Ishmael. The language, the most prominent language that existed in that region and in that area was Akkadian. That's why if you go to a linguist and you ask them what language did Ishmael speak, what language did Abraham speak, they'll tell you Akkadian. And if you say to them, but my prophet said he spoke Arabic, they'll then tell you that's not true. That's false. Arabic didn't exist then. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and this is what I was trying to get at a little earlier, right? If Muhammad is a true prophet of God, okay, how is he making a mistake like this? How is he saying that Ishmael spoke Arabic when we know today, based on evidence, that, and I gave you the example of a linguistic work by an Arabic-speaking credible linguist who agrees that this is a historical claim, that this is incorrect. So, why is Muhammad getting this wrong?
Regarding what Ishmael spoke, even the Bible talk about that the land of Arabia. Why they call it Arabia? And it's related to Arabic speaking word, Arabia, and the land of Paran. And you're relying on hadith, and this hadith. If what his name Ishmael, peace upon him, Ishmael was born from Hajar, and Hajar, she's an Egyptian woman. To be honest, I don't know. Did the Egyptian spoke different language than Arabic then? And
No, the
why?
point, yeah, the point I was making is, right, you have
Yeah,
ancient Egyptian languages as well, okay? But the
okay.
point I was making is that at that time, 1800 BC, and I'm asking you to look this up, okay? And go and ask, right, credible linguists, and they will tell you Arabic did not exist at that time, okay?
But
I'll give you an
okay,
example, okay? The
if it's
Bible, wait, hold on. The
yeah, yeah,
Bible,
I'm
the
holding
Bible,
on.
let me finish the point first, okay? The Bible does not say that any of these people spoke Arabic. It doesn't mention the Arabic language, okay? It doesn't say they spoke Arabic in any verse. What I'm saying is that Muhammad here is very specific. Muhammad says, yeah, Ishmael spoke Arabic. What linguists will tell you if you go and ask them is that can't be possible. Arabic didn't exist back then. Okay, you're talking
Okay,
1800
okay.
BC.
Let's say what you are saying is true. What does it prove?
Okay, what it proves is, right, and I asked you this earlier, okay? If Muhammad is a true prophet of God, would he be making mistakes like that?
Okay, I'm going to go along. Uh, uh, Muhammad as a human, does he make mistake or not?
So you're again, so you're negating his prophethood then. He
No,
didn't
no, no,
receive
no,
divine
no.
revelation.
What I'm saying is the perfection is for God only. Beside God, even Jesus said, "Don't call me good. The Father, is the only good." What I'm saying is, if what you're saying is true, does the Quran, as I mentioned, talk about so many different stuff? I would like to you allow me to mention few, so at least we can carry on talking about it.
So are you willing to concede? Okay, so you're willing to concede then. Again, I expect you'll go and you'll check this and you'll ask the linguist yourself. But are you willing to concede, at least based on the current evidence I've provided you with, that Muhammad gets this wrong?
You know, you're spoken about hadith, and you are trying to prove that the prophet have done mistake according to hadith, while Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed the prophet that he is his prophet, and he is with a great character. And the prophet, even before he became prophet, as I mentioned, he used to be called al-amin. Al-Amin, that means the trustworthy among his people. And when he asks them, if I would tell you that there is behind, this is the first time he come face to face against his tribe.
Hmm.
He told them, I lived among you 40 years. If I told you behind that mountain there is an army will attack you, would you say I am a liar? They told him, no, we will believe you because we trust you and you never say a lie. So when he tells them, I am a messenger from God to you, then they disapprove him and they didn't believe him. And
But how can I trust Muhammad if he's making stuff
you,
up,
you,
if he's getting stuff wrong?
you don't have to trust Muhammad. You
But
are
this
as
is,
a person.
you asked me about the
Let me
evidence.
let,
You
let,
asked
let
me
me
about
tell you.
the
Let me
you
tell
asked
you.
me about you asked me
Let,
about the evidence. You asked me about the evidence of this specific hadith, right?
okay,
And
okay,
the point I was trying to make is that if Muhammad's coming out with stuff that he's just making up, right? If
okay.
he's just making stuff up, why would I trust someone who's just making stuff up?
Let me tell you why. You need to trust the Prophet Muhammad because Prophet Muhammad come with a clear legislation to mankind, different than the legislation of the Moses, because Moses law it's specific for the Jews, the race, while Prophet Muhammad came with the legislation to all mankind regarding inheritance, regarding divorce, regarding commerce, regarding what's lawful and unlawful, regarding what you need to eat, what you need to do, don't backbite, regarding dealing with other people. And this is what Muhammad came up with. He confirmed the oneness of God. He confirmed the previous scripture and previous prophet. He came to confirm that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the only our creator, confirm that all the prophet and messenger came with one message to all mankind: the Lord our God is one, and to submit and worship and total submission to one creator, not to associate anybody with. And all the prophet and messenger, including Jesus, they done exactly the same. So Prophet Muhammad is not only prophet to Islam, it prophet to all mankind, including you. So what you are trying to do to disprove his prophecy, you need to come up with something, as you already did. You rely on a scholar to disprove the Quran, and it's up to you, because faith is never by force.
Mm. I know that, but what I'm saying is that I understand what you're saying. There's an element of faith to religion. I get that, okay? And there's an element of me voluntarily believing in something. I have to make that step. I understand that premise. I'm not negating that. What I'm saying is, if someone comes with a clear sign or proof, for example, that Muhammad got things wrong or the Quran gets things wrong and makes mistakes, then why should I believe in that if the evidence tells me there's no point because the evidence says that it's not true? Um, there's other issues as well. We'll go to, and I want to get your take on this because you wanted to go to the Quran. So let's go to Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157, because this
Okay.
is like this obviously is a big issue for scholars today, right?
Put it on the screen. We talk about it.
Yeah, I have it on the screen now. So, okay,
Beautiful, beautiful,
let me
beautiful.
ask you first.
Before you ask me, if Jesus were crucified, and die for the sin of other, do you think? Please reflect, because it's very, very important. Do you think that the Father is just regarding the Son?
But you don't believe in the Father.
Let me say that He died on the cross, yeah, and what you're saying is right. Where Quran, God of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reject and said they didn't crucify him, and he was sin.
But here's the issue, though. I don't, actually, I should ask you first and foremost. I should ask you: is your position the standard Sunni position of there was substitution done, that someone else was put on the cross instead of Christ, or do you go with the other position, which is that Christ was on the cross, but Allah preserved him on the cross and then raised him up to himself? What exactly is your position on this verse? Because there's different Muslims have different ideas of what may have happened here.
My position is exactly like the Quran say, that there is somebody else was crucified in his place, and he was saved. And
so let me ask you then, because you talked about God being just, okay? So that man is being punished for a crime that he didn't commit by Allah's authority, okay? How is that fair, and how is Allah just if he's putting someone else on the cross that doesn't deserve to be on the cross?
Let me answer that. The one who died on the cross, he must be one of the criminal who been crucified like the other two. And God, because God plan and other people plan. When Jesus, peace upon him, he obey, he submit, he glorify, he praise, he praise his Father, and he done the will of God, and he done exactly all what he need to do and God, whenever Jesus done any miracle, he always raised his hand to the Father and thanks him, and he was grateful. And Jesus trust his Father, and even when Shaitan, he take Jesus to the desert and he test him, and he told him, through yourself, even Shaitan, he said, the Father will send his angel and he will save you. then what Jesus responded to Shaitan? Don't test your God, and Jesus trusts this God. So accordingly, God of the Bible, he teach in Ezekiel chapter 18 that the fathers, they don't die for the sin of the children. The children, they don't die for the sin of the father.
Here's
So
the problem.
every
Here's the
soul,
problem. Hold on. Hold on.
no,
Here's
no,
the
no, I
problem.
didn't
No,
finish.
no,
I
no, no.
didn't
Hold
finish.
on. Hold on. The
No, no,
problem
I
with
don't.
that,
Hold on. Allow me to finish.
hold on. We need to keep it focused on one thing, okay? You're going to a million different things and then trying to bring them all together, okay? One thing at a time, okay? Because if we start doing that, I can rattle off 20 different things in the Quran and then there's no point in this conversation because then you'll have 20 different things to address. So let's take it one thing at a time, okay? The problem with that verse in Ezekiel is that it's refuted in chapter 36 because God says in chapter 36 of Ezekiel that he's going to come and atone for the sins of mankind. Okay? So there's a context to that that's provided in a later chapter. That's the first thing, okay?
Can I respond to
Secondly,
that? Can I
secondly, I'm
respond to that?
responding.
No,
Hold on.
no,
I'm
please,
responding.
one by one, one by
I'm
one, one
responding
by
to
one.
what you said. I'm
Look,
responding to the things you said, okay?
no, no,
The other thing, my other issue,
no,
okay?
no,
My
no,
other issue,
no, no.
hold on,
You
hold
don't,
on.
you don't, you don't,
mentioned a
you
couple
don't
of
carry on
mentioned a
because
couple of points. You mentioned a couple of points, okay? I'm responding to your points, okay? The other point you mentioned is that you believe, okay, that a criminal was put on the cross instead of Jesus, okay? Ibn Kathir doesn't say that. What does Ibn Kathir say in his tafsir about this?
you interrupt me, and now you ask me
I'm
about Ibn
responding
Kathir.
to what you said. I'm
Uh,
responding to what you said. You
no,
said, right, you
what
told me that a
I
criminal was
want.
put on the cross instead of Jesus.
Look,
I'm asking you, what does Ibn Kathir say? Okay, because I'm going with a reliable Islamic tafsir writer, okay, a commentator, right, who's reliable within your tradition. What does he say about this verse? What's his tafsir say?
I'm going to carry on answer Ezekiel, then I will come to Ibn Kathir. Do you agree, or you're not going to allow me?
No, you can continue on. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Uh, while in Ezekiel it teach that the soul who sin, it's the only one who die, yeah, and the one who repent and leave all the bad deed and submit and repent, God will be forgiven all of its sin as it's never die. The sin, the man will not die if he repent. While you said God, he came and he died for other people's sin. Let me tell
That's what
you
Ezekiel
that,
says.
hold on. You need to know that God is eternal and immortal and invisible, and God does not die. Even if he wants to die, he is not able to die because he is the all living, all hearing, all knowing, and God does not die for the sin of other. But God, when you repent to him as a human, when you repent with sincerity, God mercy is bigger than any sin you done, and he will forgive you and he will admit you to paradise.
Okay, here's
Regard,
the problem with that, though. Here's the problem with that, okay?
regarding Ibn Kathir, I'm relying on Quran, and I don't care about Ibn Kathir because I don't have Ibn Kathir my book. My book is the Quran. While Ibn Kathir he can uh, interrupt whatever he want, I will accept it. But it doesn't mean that Ibn Kathir or Bukhari or anybody else, they don't have mistake, or they don't have something contradicting to the Quran. And this is why I use my mind to analyze what to accept, what not.
So Ibn
My
Kathir,
question
okay,
for you, my
wait,
question for you,
hold on. Ibn Kathir, then, okay, going by your logic, okay. So was Ibn Kathir a Muslim or was he not a Muslim?
uh, my question for you
No, no, no.
is
Hold on.
that
Don't run. No, no. One sec. The question's very specific. Was Ibn Kathir a Muslim or not a Muslim?
yeah, he was Muslim, and
Okay.
for me,
According to Ibn
for
Kathir,
me,
then okay, one second. According to Ibn Kathir, if Ibn Kathir is a Muslim, there's a problem, okay? Because Ibn Kathir believes in his tafsir, right? In Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157, right? Jesus went into his disciples shortly before the crucifixion and asked them, okay? And there's another Quranic verse which says that the disciples of Jesus were Muslims, okay? Even though that can't be proven historically speaking, but that's a separate issue, okay? He asked them, which one of you will take my place? Okay. And one of the disciples says, I'll do it. I'll do it. And then Jesus makes the disciple look like him and him look like the disciple. If that happens, right, then that man is crucified, put in Jesus's place, even though he doesn't deserve to go through that humiliation, that punishment, and that torture. Okay. Whether willingly or not willingly, right? Allah has committed an injustice upon the cross, going by Ibn Kathir's logic. Okay, so that to me makes no sense. And do you still believe he's a Muslim when he believes a righteous man was put on the cross in Jesus' place and Allah committed an injustice?
uh, if I am apostle of Prophet Jesus, I would sacrifice myself to protect him from anything else. And the companion of the Prophet, peace upon him, when they fought in the battle, they, shadow him from all around to protect him. So this is after Jesus was his apostle for 3 years. I find it odd that none of them were ready to sacrifice his life for them. Uh, Beside, when after the resurrection, why Maria Magdalena didn't recognize Jesus when he spoke to her? Can you tell me why? And why all the apostles deserted him and fled away from him?
Well, very simply, he gives the answer. He says that when the shepherd is struck, the sheep will depart. Okay, he actually explains that. He explains it within the verse. Okay, in terms of the appearance of Christ at a certain point at the resurrection, he masks his appearance, but then he later unveils. Okay, that's the point that's being made within the text. Okay, because everything has to be fulfilled in a specific way. Okay, this is the whole idea of prophecy fulfillment. And this is the other thing I don't understand about the Quran. Okay, the message of the Quran is in complete contradiction with the message in the Torah and the message in the Injil. I don't understand that, right? When there's no
What's the message in the Torah and Injil?
Well, the Torah, for example, in a number of places, okay, is what we would call, and what scholars today would call, is a typology. Okay,
Which is
consistently, the prophets in the Old Testament, okay, according to the scholars, right, are pointing towards a future fulfillment of all things through God Himself. Okay,
okay. Thank you.
and then you have other issues then as well, right? For
Okay.
example, in the Torah, consistently across the Torah, God, for some reason, takes these anthropomorphic forms. He takes these kind of humanoid forms, okay? But according to the Quran, your Allah never enters into creation in that way,
No, he
okay?
did. He did enter in a way, but it wasn't visible.
As in a human form.
No,
But according to the
because,
Torah, he does.
we will come to this. But what
No,
I
no.
want,
I'm asking you, why
no,
does he
no,
enter? Hold on. Why does he
I will
enter?
come to
Why
that. I
does
will
he
come to that.
enter?
I will
Why
come to
does he
that.
enter in the Old Testament in a number of places across the Tanakh? Why does he take this human form?
I have I have a question. What is the two commandment which they are the greatest teach by Jesus?
Oh, the two greatest commandments: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Was the second one?
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay, let me correct you here. The first one, you're absolutely right about it. The second greatest commandment, O Israel, the Lord our God is one.
No, that's not true. It doesn't say that.
Is not true?
It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that in the gospel. Jesus says what the two greatest commandments are, and he qualifies them. We can go to the verse if you want. He says the first greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. And then he says the entirety of the law and the prophets rests upon these two commandments, because the
Okay,
first
okay,
5 commandments are about loving God. The second
okay.
5 are about loving your neighbor. Oh, hold
Yes.
on. We have someone else in the chat. What I'm going to do is, because we've been going for quite some time, I'm going to give this other guest a chance. So what I'm going to do is it okay if I invite you to come back next Saturday and we can continue it from here? Because I have another guest who's been waiting, and I want to give him some time as well. It wouldn't be fair if we just keep going for like an hour or 2 hours. So we can continue next week.
To be honest, it's not fair because we are in the middle of conversation, and now because somebody else came, you want to dismiss me.
No,
It's
no, no.
not.
I'm
It
not
doesn't
saying that.
work
I'm
like
not saying
that.
that. What I'm saying is we can finish this point, okay, this current point, and then we can pick it up next week. Because if I have a guest in the thing waiting, do you think it's fair if he's waiting for an hour or 2 hours while we're having a discussion? Because
To
I've
be
already, to
honest,
be fair, I have given you. Hold on, I have already given you close to an hour of my time, okay, and I'm inviting you.
I give you
I'm
2 hours
inviting.
of my time.
I'm in. Yeah, I know, and I'm
No, no.
inviting you. I'm inviting you to come back next week, and we can continue the
Uh,
discussion
uh,
further. Okay.
invite,
So
give me another 5 minutes. Then
okay. Now,
take your stuff.
before you go, before we finish up, I just want to finish with the point I was making. Okay, that's the consistent point. Okay, that's made in the Old Testament. Okay, in the New Testament, on the other hand, okay, this is the other thing that I don't understand. Okay, and this is agreed by scholars, by the way. Okay, one of the terms that goes back to the historical Jesus, based on the criterion of what we call the criterion of dissimilarity, is the term Abba, which means dad. Okay. Now, according to modern scholarship, right, again, agnostics and atheists, I'll give you an example. Bart Ehrman believes this. Jesus referred to God as dad. Okay. Can you do that, or is that haram in Islam? Because if I go by Surah Al-Ma'idah verse 18, you can't refer to Allah as your dad.
You know, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, the peacemaker is called the sons of God. A sons of God is metaphorical, talk about the
But not in the
servant,
context
the
of Jesus.
obedient. No, no,
Not
no.
in the
Look,
context of
look,
Jesus.
look. Regarding the Father and the Son, according to your Bible, God is the Father of the Israel, is the Father of Adam, the
But
Father
he's
of
the father
David,
of
the
Jesus
Father.
in what sense? Hold
Uh,
on. He's the
you,
father of
you,
Jesus.
you,
Hold on. He's the father of Jesus in what sense?
you are interrupting when I'm talking. So you ask me, and as with the due respect, when you're talking, I'm not interrupting. And when I'm trying to answer you,
But I'm trying to keep you
listen,
focused. I'm
listen.
trying to keep you focused, okay? Because you're not providing, for example, okay? You're not providing credible scholarship to back up what you're saying. You're just saying stuff. You're
You
claiming
know,
stuff. I'll give you an
according,
example.
no,
Well,
no.
hold on.
Before
I'm
you
gonna
give
get
me
you something.
example,
I want to get you something.
allow me to finish
One
what I'm
second. I want to
saying.
get you something. I want to get
According
you
to,
something. Okay, so we have. I'm just gonna show you this so you can see. Okay, and we'll finish it up here because the other guest is leaving and joining because they're waiting. Okay, and you can continue next week.
you
Okay,
know,
but I want to show you
according
something.
to,
Okay, hold on. I want to show you something. Okay, this is a Greek critical commentary. Okay, a Greek critical, most up-to-date tafsir commentary, right, on Matthew. That's written by one of our most credible scholars on Matthew. Okay. What I'm saying is, when I give you my viewpoint on any of these gospels, I'm not basing it on my own reading of the gospels. I'm going to the most up-to-date critical Greek scholarship that there is to back up my points. Because as you would say to me when it comes to the Quran, you would accuse me of not going to the tafsir and you'd accuse me of not knowing the Arabic. Okay? I'm going to put the same, hold on.
anything.
I'm going to put the same standard upon you when I invite you back next week and we go through these verses. I want you to prove from the scholarship, from critical Greek scholarship, that they agree with the points that you're making, okay?
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something, because you keep interrupt me and you go and put your point of view always. You know, according to the God of the Bible, even the God of the Bible and Islam, he calls the children of the Most High, they are gods. So
Not according to the Quran.
no, I'm talking about the Bible, and
Yeah,
this is why
this is your
you
this
know,
is your problem.
according,
This is your problem with the
no,
Quran,
no, it's
okay?
not my problem.
It is your problem. It is your problem because in the Quran it says that you are just a slave of Allah and nothing more. Okay.
Uh,
What I'm
uh,
saying is you can't say, for
wasn't
example,
it
when you're praying to Allah, right? You can't say
wasn't
Allah,
wasn't
my Abba,
what
my dad.
was
Okay.
wasn't
You're not allowed
wasn't
to say that. Okay.
wasn't
Okay. So one sec.
no,
Before
no, not
finish
one
up,
second. You're
finish
interrupting
up,
me. You're
finish up one
interrupting me
second.
every
The
time.
other guest,
Wasn't
hold
Jesus?
on,
Wasn't
hold on.
Jesus?
Be fair to the other guest. The
Was
other
not.
guest wants to come on too. Okay. Be fair to the other guest. I gave you already an hour. Okay. I'm inviting you back next week and we can continue from this point. Okay. And we can have it timed back and forth. Okay. I will have it timed so we won't interrupt each other and we can do it timed so that no one's interrupted. Okay. Come back next week and we'll go through these verses together. Okay. And I don't mind whatever verses you want to go through. Okay. But
I
again,
want to
1
say
p.m.
I want
next
to say
Saturday.
one verse. I want to
Okay.
say one verse.
Okay.
And I want you to compare me to Jesus. Jesus submit, serve, obey, serve, glorify, praise, and fell on his face to worship God. He is exactly done the same as any Muslim does. Do you
Can you?
agree or not?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. Can you, as a Muslim, call yourself the Son of Man?
I am son of man.
No, no, no. Hold on. What
I
does
am son
Jesus?
of my
Hold on.
father.
What does Jesus mean by Son of Man?
God is not a man.
You didn't hear what I
God,
said. You know, you're ignoring the question. Hold on.
uh,
Okay, I'll explain. I'll explain.
read
Just,
your
wait, hold
read
on. I'll explain.
Isaiah.
You asked me a question, I'm answering.
Read
You asked me a
read
question, I'm
read
answering.
Isaiah. Read
Ask,
Isaiah
hold on,
46,
hold
verse
on.
number
You're
9. No, no,
asking me
no,
a
no, no.
question.
You
You're asking a
interrupt me
question, I'm
again.
explaining. Okay,
You
this is
interrupt me
my answer.
again.
Okay, hold on, hold on. Let me answer your
You're
question.
not showing respect for
Okay,
the conversation.
hold on. Okay. You keep interrupting me. Okay. Let me answer your question. Okay. You keep interrupting me. Let me answer your question. Okay. When Jesus says Son of Man, okay, he's going in line with what your Quran says in chapter 2, verse 210. Okay. Because according to Jesus, the Son of Man is a divine figure who on the day of judgment is going to come with his angels and judge the entire world. Okay. You as a Muslim can't say that. Okay. You can't say that as a Muslim. Okay. This is the point I was trying to get to. Okay. Whenever Jesus talks about himself as the Son of Man, he's talking about a divine partner with Allah who on the day of judgment is going to come on the clouds of heaven with his angels, right, and judge the entirety of humanity. Okay. According to chapter 2, verse 210 of the Quran, that's a prerogative that belongs with Allah only. Okay. But Jesus says that he is that Son of Man who has that divine authority. Okay. So what do you do with that? Okay. I've unmuted you. I've answered your question, okay? Next week when you come, we'll have a timed back and forth so we don't interrupt each other and we'll address the verses. But when you're bringing up commentaries or verses, please back it up with credible scholarship. Don't just give me your own tafsir. I don't care about your tafsir. I want you to quote Greek critical scholars that agree with your viewpoint that back it up, because you would expect the same from me when I'm looking at your Quran. You'd want me to go to credible tafsir authors and you'd want me to go to credible scholarship to back up my points, because otherwise I could just claim anything about the Quran.
You can claim whatever you like. Besides, next week I'm going to Spain. I live in London. I'm going to Spain for Christmas, so I'm not going to be able to come. Regarding our conversation,
I can put my email in the thing if you want, and you can contact me by email.
You don't need to. But to be honest, I didn't enjoy this conversation with you, because every single time I need to put my view on, you come up with something and interrupt, and I hate when people interrupt me. Thank you very much.
You were going on tangents, my friend. I was trying to keep you focused on one point after another, and you were going on tangents. You're always free to come on, okay?
Take care of it. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Hello?
Hello?
Are you Muslim?
Yeah, but when I made this account, I was Satanist.
So you started from Satanism and then you converted to Islam?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I was looking at this first. I apologize for the wait.
It's all right.
I wish the other guy had been more kind of honest with the discussion. It would have been a bit better.
Yeah.
I think you probably saw from his demeanor it wasn't the best discussion to have with someone who just outright didn't want to listen to what I was trying to say. I was trying to, like, I don't mind you saying anything as long as we keep it focused on one point and don't go off on different tangents to different areas. I think that's more than fair. So my point was specifically with this verse here, okay? Actually, do you want to respond to any of the other stuff I brought up, the other issues with the drowning of Pharaoh or the Arabic thing in Ishmael, or do you want to just
No,
focus-
we can start fresh.
Okay. So we'll just focus on this. He's still going in the comments. Like, dude, let it go. I was more than fair to the guy. I invited him to come back, and he's still going in the comments. And by the way, all I was trying to encourage him was, and I think you would agree with me, right? If I'm giving you a verse in your Quran, you would want me to look to, good Islamic scholarship to back up my points, because otherwise I could just claim anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to say to him. Like, I don't know if you noticed, he was just saying this verse in the Bible means this, it means this, it means this, but based on what evidence, based on what scholarship? Because like the Quran is written in Arabic, okay? And one of the claims I often get by Muslims consistently is, oh, you don't know Arabic, you need to check the tafsirs, you need to check this, you need to check that. And to be fair to Muslims, I try to do that. I go to the tafsirs, I go to, whatever lexicon I have for the Arabic, and I try and make sense of it. What I'm expecting of Muslims is, if you want to go to the Bible, do the same thing. Be fair, okay? Go to it. We have critical commentaries. Like I gave the one for Matthew, right? This big book here, right? This is a Greek critical commentary on Matthew, right? See, and by the way, some of these commentaries, they're written by agnostics and atheists, so they don't have any bias in their commentary, right? In their interpretation of these verses. They're giving you the most fair, up-to-date interpretation they can, based on all the evidence that they have. And I think that that's the fairest possible way to try and understand these things. But anyway, so this verse here, how, like, do you accept and acknowledge that, universally speaking, within academia, that they regard the crucifixion as a historical fact?
Like historians or?
Yeah, academics, historians.
Yeah, they do.
So and you know that the reason they come to that conclusion, right, for them, and I have all the sources with me, right? They've written about this extensively in their historical works. For them, it's based on the evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question would be to Muslims in general. Are you Sunni Muslim?
Yeah.
So why do you believe in something like this when, like, all the evidence points to the contrary? That was kind of the question I was trying to ask the guy, but he didn't really want to answer it.
So what the verse says is, it was made appear to them. So if God made it appear that he was crucified, then that's what humans are going to believe, because that's what they were provided with. Because if you look at empirical evidence, which, like, based on like critical sources of what the Jews wrote about his crucifixion, and so you would find that he did die and he was crucified on the cross. But if God wants it so that another person was crucified in his place, or he ascended to heaven, then that's what the people will still think, because the people are ignorant of what God does.
So I went to Ibn Kathir's tafsir on this to see what Ibn Kathir said. So what Ibn Kathir says is that Jesus, the before his crucifixion, he went into his disciples and he told them beforehand that this is what's going to happen. And he told them, because remember, according to the Quran, the disciples of Jesus were Muslims, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is if they knew that this was going to happen, where are the reports after that it happened in this way?
So, as of now, in like 2025, what Christians have are not the accounts of the disciples. Historically, like agnostics or atheists, they know that the Gospel of Matthew, the 4 Gospels, they have nothing to do with the disciples in hand. The disciples didn't write those Gospels. They were written by people later on, and they weren't even seen as canon or canonized as the main scripture.
Hold on. Before you go any further, the stuff that you're claiming now, do you have the sources and the evidence for it?
Yeah, let me just pull some up.
Okay, because I can produce to you, for example, evidence to the contrary. So, for example, you do know that within scholarship, all those Gospels are regarded as first century texts, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you do understand as well, I'm going to give you something else, right? You do know that it's also accepted within scholarship that Paul the Apostle knew the direct disciples of Jesus, and he had contact with them and communication with them. Okay. So the idea here, and I'll just give you an example. I don't know if you know this, right?
Mhm.
And I want to get your take on this, right? Because one of the scholars Muslims like to go to, and by the way, if you're about to bring up a scholar, don't cherry pick, be consistent, okay?
Mhm.
So one of the most prominent scholars that Muslims like to go to, and I'm assuming this is one of the ones you have ready to go, is probably Bart Ehrman, okay?
Mhm.
Now, the issue with Bart Ehrman is Bart Ehrman believes the direct disciples of Jesus, who according to the Quran were Muslim, Bart Ehrman believes that they believed to have witnessed his resurrection and then subsequently worshipped him as Allah.
Mhm.
So is he right?
No.
But
I mean,
but you're gonna cherry pick his other thing, right? And you want to go to that, but you're gonna say he's not right about the other thing.
mhm.
Does
So
that like fair
So
objective?
my point here is if you read the works of any historian, you will find that there were other gospels than the main four gospels that Christians currently follow. And there was no such thing as the New Testament until about 230 AD ish. There was no such thing as the four main gospels or one scripture like the New Testament. There were many gospels, there are many historical accounts of the other gospels. So until even the late 4th century, Christian communities used numerous gospels, like I would say over 30 or even 40 gospels, which included the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Peter, Gospel
Mhm.
of the Hebrews, Gospel of the Egyptians, Infancy Gospel of James, and so on and so on. And for centuries, all over 2 to 3 centuries in early Christianity, these were seen as mainstream until eventually Christianity, like the heads of the church, started to reject those beliefs, and they stopped like becoming mainstream, and by the 5th century they stopped existing. The problem with the Bible is that the Bible doesn't have a logical interpretation. There was an interpretation that they made in the Nicene Creed. They made in Nicaea, I think it was in the Third Council, and they made that interpretation as the only canon way to understand the Bible. And when they did that, the Gnostics, especially the Valentinian Gnostics, which made up the majority of Christians at the time, they tried to go against that, and for centuries they didn't believe in that, which is why today we see that in Christianity we have so many denominations, like especially on Orthodoxy and Western Christians, they have very different understandings of how the
Yeah.
Gospels work. And even in the canon, the book canons, you see that a different amount of books, like the Protestant canon and Orthodox canon, there's like almost a difference of 30 to 40 books.
Mhm.
So you see that there's no historical evidence that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were universally accepted as the mainstream until centuries later. And if you and you come to the
Okay,
idea.
let's stop there because that's
Mhm.
you're just gonna
Mhm.
you're gonna keep. I want to address each point individually, and then we can get to
Mhm.
other points in a second.
Mhm.
'Cause otherwise, we'll just have 30 points to address. So let's try and
Mhm.
keep it point by point.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the context of the New Testament canon, which you agree is all of that canon is from the first
Mhm.
century, okay? They're
Mhm.
all first century documents, and they're regarded widely within scholarship as first century documents, okay?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if we go with Paul's, I'll say again, if you want to be extremely cynical here in the epistles of Paul, it still doesn't
Yeah.
change the fact that even within academia, about half of them are regarded as authentic. Okay, so if I
Mhm.
limit it to the authentic ones, Paul is actually addressing even early on in the church's
Mhm.
infancy these Gnostic groups. Okay, these kind of
Mhm.
breakaway Gnostic traditions that began to emerge. Let's just say. The other thing is that in the 2nd century, when we talk about the early church fathers and the apostolic fathers, okay, there's
Mhm.
a consistency with their theology that traces itself or is in line perfectly with everything pretty
Mhm.
much that's in the New Testament canon that we have today.
Mhm.
What that would lead us to believe, okay, is that that canon, at least in their mind, seems to be the established canon because they're not quoting Gnostic sources.
Mhm.
In fact, I'll give you an example. Irenaeus in his work against heresies, okay, again,
Mhm.
we're talking about a late 2nd century prominent Christian figure, okay, Christian leader in the church, is literally addressing these Gnostic books that emerged. Okay,
Mhm.
because much of the books that you're talking about, the ones that were formally rejected later, were specific to these smaller Christian communities that were
Mhm.
emerging, that were giving prevalence to these particular texts. Okay, but they're all
Mhm.
2nd century texts. None of them are first
Yeah.
century texts. Okay, the first century text, the stuff that we regard as canonical, ironically, all of that is from the first century. It's not from the 2nd century. Okay,
Mhm.
so in terms of the early church figures, none of them are giving credence to these texts. In fact, they're writing books such as Against, like all of them have a book similar to Against Heresies where they address these different texts. I gave you the example of Irenaeus.
Yeah.
But in the other epistles that were written by some of the apostolic fathers, like Clement of Alexandria, Ignatius of Antioch, for example, in their epistles where they're addressing these different issues, they are taking them head on. Like, guys, don't listen to these guys over here. We know what the gospel is. Okay, so
Mhm.
what I'm saying is, like, if you and by the way, I recommend you get this. Okay, you can buy online a book of the apostolic writings. It's like a volume that
Mhm.
contains all of them. You'll see they're consistently all believing the same thing, pretty much. Okay, they
Mhm.
might have varying viewpoints and one or small side issues, but as far as what constitutes the
Mhm.
gospel, they're all in perfect agreement. Okay,
So,
so here,
what I
let me
was.
finish it. I'm still responding to your
Mhm.
thing. Okay, I'm still
Mhm.
responding to what you said. Okay, so that historical breakdown that you provided wasn't totally inaccurate. It wasn't totally accurate in terms of what we know. Secondly, in terms of the authenticity of the Gospels themselves, which are first-century documents, where's the external evidence to suggest that they're not original to the authors that they claim to be written by?
So, do you know in what places these four gospels emerged in?
No, I'm asking. No, my question was very specific because
Mhm.
this is the counter argument that's provided to the same scholars that say that, and they don't have an answer to it because that argument wasn't presented right until around the 19th century. It was a
Mhm.
19th century invention that came up where they were just saying the authors were anonymous. But when
Yeah.
they were asked, provide proof that they're anonymous, where's the evidence that proves they're anonymous? They say, well, there isn't any. We're just deducing that.
Yeah, because you, as a historian in this time, you can't know anything with 100% certainty. There's no such thing as that. You have to deduce them based on logic. And as
Yeah.
for what we know, we cannot come to the possible conclusion that these four gospels that existed among many other gospels that circulated across the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, we have no way to make sure that these four gospels were written by these particular people or
There is one
assigned.
method. There is
and
one method,
and
okay? Do you know what
and
the method is
actually,
called?
so you know the four gospels that are in the current canon in the New
Mhm.
Testament, they were not referred to as Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John until about 180, like 180 AD, because like early scholars like Justin Martyr, he refers to the memoirs of the apostles, which includes 13 distinct gospels. They're very, and only four of them among the 13 that he lists in his works, only four of them are currently in the New Testament.
No,
And
the,
those
the-
four.
no, hold on. The text you're talking about with Justin Martyr is where he's attacking certain offshoot texts in light of the prevailing texts that are authoritative. Okay,
Mhm.
Papias does the same thing. Okay, so you're misquoting what Justin says in that. Okay,
Mhm.
because Papias, he actually goes through, for example, with some of them. I think he goes through the one with Matthew, how Matthew wrote Matthew. And
Mhm.
Papias, by the way, is one of the earliest, if not the earliest, apostolic authors that we have, whose writings we still have today.
Mhm.
And he attributes to Matthew. So
Mhm.
this is the point I'm trying to make, okay? And the other thing as well, I don't know if you know this, okay? With the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Acts, or sorry, not the Gospel of Acts, the Acts of the Apostles, right? Both of those are written by allegedly Luke, right?
Mhm.
Okay, but I don't know if you know this. Academia is an agreement, right? There is an agreement within scholarship. The general consensus is that the author of Acts and Luke's was in fact someone that was there with Paul.
Mhm.
Now, here's the thing. In Acts, he claims to be Luke. He claims to be going around with Paul. He claims to be relaying the things he saw with Paul. Okay?
Mhm.
So who is he then?
So, why do you take Paul as an authority?
Oh, good question. Great question. What you seem like a clever guy. You probably know my answer, okay?
Mhm.
My answer is very simple. The reason I take Paul as an authority is because of the fact, okay? And again, this isn't just me who takes Paul as
Mhm.
authority. Remember this, okay? And this is something
Mhm.
Muslims overlook. When historians are writing texts on the historical Jesus, why do they never use the Quran? Why do they always use the Bible if it's invalid?
Because we're debating Christians, so we have to debate them by their own scripture.
No, you didn't hear my argument.
Oh.
So when historians are putting together a text on the historical Jesus and who the historical
Mhm.
Jesus was, as a proof text for that, as a source text to come to that understanding, they use the Gospels. They never use the Quran.
Uh-huh.
Why is that? Why are they deriving their historical data about the historical Jesus from a text that you Muslims believe is totally invalid?
Because historians, if you only have something to work with, then that's all you can use. If you only have weak evidence, then you can only use the evidence rather that you use nothing at
Why not
all.
the Quran? Why not the Quran? Why not use the Quran?
Because from a historical perspective, the Quran comes later. But for instance, if the historians wants to study about the Old Testament, they would not be using the New Testament, even though you would claim that the New Testament comes in harmony with the Old Testament because God has revealed both of them. But they would not use the New Testament. They would use scriptures like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the same way we believe that the Quran is the last revelation from God.
Yeah.
But since it comes like almost 500 years after the last revelation, which we believe to be the gospel, that's why historians from a secular perspective cannot use it because of the time gap. The same way historians would never use the New Testament to verify anything in the Old Testament because they're two very distinct manuscripts that emerged centuries and centuries later.
I understand that, but the issue is that if the Quran was truly valid and could truly present itself as a valid account of history, something is truly miraculous, okay? Why can't historians see that?
Because people can't see many things. There are many people who reject the very idea of God, so they would reject Christianity. They would reject the very concept that God exists. There are many people who believe different things. There isn't necessarily that a single person would find one thing in a book and everyone else will agree.
Well,
That's,
okay, I'll give you the simple answer, okay? I'll give you the simple answer where I was going with that, okay? The problem with the Quran, and then I'll get into your question about why I take Paul over Muhammad in a second. But the reason they say that, okay, has to do with the fact that all the evidence we have from the first century up until the time of Muhammad only proves one thing. Right? It proves, for example, that all these followers from all these different communities, whether they were the orthodox position of the time or they were these, Gnostic offshoot groups, they were all in agreement that Jesus was divine.
No,
Okay?
Gnosticism
Hold on.
doesn't believe that Jesus was divine in the sense
Who?
mainstream Christians do.
I'm not saying in the sense that mainstream
No,
Christians do.
they would
I'm saying
believe
that in the
that.
sense, hold on, in the sense that his view, for example, is a completely heretical view within the paradigm of Islam. So I'll give you an example, okay? Take the author of the Gospel of Judas. Okay, he believes in a demiurge. Okay, and he believes that Jesus was the first and finest emanation from God. Okay,
So,
now if I held that view, would I be considered a Muslim?
no.
Exactly. This is my point. Okay. So he holds to a view that Jesus is divine in some sense and this was kind of one of the mainstream Gnostic positions that was consistent with most of these Gnostic groups. What I'm saying is, right, all of these texts, and we can go through them one by one. I have no problem doing that with you. I can prove to you from all these texts that all these authors hold to a view that Jesus is divine in some sense. Okay. So what I'm saying is the view of the Quran, or the view that the Quran has of Jesus, where's the evidence of that before the Quran? Where are the Muslims before the Quran? Okay, because I can go through a number of claims the Quran makes, and then I can ask you for historical data or historical evidence, and you'll tell me there is none.
So I like to go through all of the claims you made. To start with, I've studied Gnosticism for a very long time, and Gnostics, which at the time served mainstream for over a century, they don't believe that Jesus was divine, and they don't believe he was divine as in God. They believe that he was an eon. They believe in, I think, 13 eons, and every single eon serves as a angelic being, non-divine, separate from God, and they come from God down to humanity to preach the message of God.
What was their specific view of Jesus in the context of that?
So mainstream Gnosticism, from the Valentina school, they would believe that Jesus came to free humans from the demiurge, and what Gnostics often do is they compare the demiurge from Satan sometimes to make it more simpler, and they believe that Jesus was an eon known as Christ, and he came almost as a messenger of God to preach away from the demiurge, and they believe that the demiurge is a form of Satan, or their understanding of Satan.
But those Gnostics, they worshipped Jesus. This is the issue. they worshipped him. So why would they worship him if they didn't view him as divine? And that's where the contradiction lies. Okay, because in the I'll just give you an example. Okay, let's take because again, let's root this in the Gnostic text. Let's take the infancy gospel of Thomas. Okay, do you know that in 2 chapters of that Jesus is worshipped, the child Jesus is worshipped?
Can you provide a verse?
Yeah, we'll go there now. Because this is where my point is leading to. In all these Gnostic texts, they portray Jesus as being what's called worship. So let's go. I'm gonna get up a PDF and then we'll go through it, okay? And then I want your take on it. And interestingly enough, right, in the infancy gospel of Thomas as well, when he performs a miracle, right, they actually sit there and say, is he an angel? Is he even a human? Is he this? Is he that? They question his the point the author is trying to point to is his divinity. But I'll show you something else as well that's quite interesting, because remember, the Quran, you probably know this, borrows from the infancy gospel of Thomas when it talks about Jesus playing with clay pigeons.
Oh, obviously, from a Muslim perspective, you would believe that the Gospel of Thomas is true. To some extent, it has like more truth than the 4 canon Gospels would do.
Oh, really? You believe that?
Yeah.
Even when it portrays Jesus as being worshipped as a child?
So they don't believe that Jesus was God. Obviously, because the Gospel of Thomas is one of those texts which is very hard to properly understand what it's saying. To interpret that text is extremely hard. But what the infancy Gospel of Thomas says in general does not suggest that Jesus is God. Like in Gospel of Thomas, it says, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See the kingdom in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside you and it is outside of you." They didn't worship Jesus because he was the same as the monad, who they believe is the unknowable God, one with Sophia. He's the embodiment of wisdom. He exists outside the sphere of existence. They treated some Gnostics, not mainstream Gnosticism was never about worshipping Jesus. Some Gnostics did elevate him a lot, but they never outright worshipped him. And if you read the Gnostic text, it never say to worship Jesus directly or say that Jesus was one with the monad. Sure, they elevate him beyond to the point where it can.
Can you read what I've highlighted, please?
Yeah, let me just read it. And the parents of the child praised God and worshipped the child Jesus.
Why are they doing that?
So this text right here might be taken as more metaphorical because Gnostics believe in a concept called unity.
Come on, dude, please, come on. Let's be honest here now. Let's not play. You know, because if we're gonna start being dishonest like that, when I just gave you a clear verse, we can go to the second example. Okay, read the second one.
And the crowd saw from the saw.
This one. Sorry, highlighted for you.
And seeing a man lying dead, he, Jesus, seized the man's hand and said, "I tell you, man, rise and do your work." And he, the man, immediately rose and worshipped him.
Okay, so why is he doing that, and why doesn't the child Jesus rebuke him?
So, because Gnostics didn't believe that Jesus was God. As I said, they elevated him to a position that can seem godlike, but they didn't believe that because
if they don't view him as God, why do they worship him?
Because Gnostics believe in a doctrine called unity of being with God, and they believe that after you reach a certain point in this gnosis, a person can literally start to become physically and mentally become one with God, where he loses the concept of desire, and God can speak through this person's flesh, like God can speak through this person, almost as though that person is God while not being God. And since they believe that the 13 eons who have come from the true God have all reached this gnosis and are perfect examples of this gnosis, they are at a stage where the true God, the monad who exists outside the sphere of creation, can speak through them and give revelation through them. And if you were to technically worship an eon, at the same time you would be worshipping the monad because he kind of speaks through them and they're physically.
Okay, give me an example where they demonstrate in one of their gospels them worshiping another eon separate from Jesus, and then that eon doesn't rebuke them.
All right, let me just find one. Wait a minute.
because you can see where I'm going with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing as well, I just want to point out something, okay? And this is something that's been pointed out, right? Because this has been one of the comparisons that's been made between the Quran and Gnostic traditions and sources, okay? You remember in the Quran, you know, when Jesus does something, like when he does the breathing the life into the clay pigeon, in the Quran it adds by the permission of Allah.
Mm-hmm.
In the original, in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, it doesn't say by the permission of Allah. It just says he does it by his own nature. Okay,
It
that's
doesn't.
the author's portraying it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hold on, I have a call incoming. Give me 2 seconds, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, my apologies. I'm back now. So like the way that it's framed, okay, within the context of these Gnostic sources is that Jesus has the authority to do things by his own authority, okay? The
Mhm.
Quran then has to redact that and then add on something like by the permission of Allah, right?
No, the reason the Quran every time in Surah Al-Ma'idah when the miracles of Jesus are worshipped, every single time at the end of the verse it adds by the permission of Allah. It's almost like expressing the fact that he didn't do it of his own authority, but the authority of Allah.
I don't know if you're familiar. I recommend you look this up, right?
Mhm.
One of the most credible universities is the University of
Mhm.
Notre Dame in Indiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the leading academics there is Gabriel Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I recommend you look this up, right? You can get it on Amazon. He has a book titled, it's sort of like the 1 second, I'll get it up here for you because I want to give you this, okay? Because he points out exactly, now this again, if you don't want to trust me and you don't want to take it from me, I'm going to give you a credible academic you can take it from, okay? 1 second, no, I think it's this one. Yeah. So,
Mm-hmm.
oh, hold on. What am I doing here? Are you sure you want to? No, let me X that down. My apologies. Gabriel Reynolds. Yeah, it's called Christianity and the Quran, the Rise of Islam in Christian Arabia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in that, he goes through sort of the origin of the Quran and the traditions and the sources from which the Quran was drawing its material.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he goes through the Gnostic stuff. He goes through the different Gnostic Gospels and he goes through their correlation with the
Mhm.
Quran. What he points out is, again, this is an academic,
Mhm.
right? A leading academic who's, again, he's the professor of Islamic studies at the University of Notre Dame. So I'm not making this up. This is his professional viewpoint as an incredible academic. He's saying that the Quran, right, is drawing from these Gnostic traditions and sources and then redacting them, because he says in the originals, in the Gnostic originals, Jesus is portrayed as divine, but then the Quran redacts that to take the divinity away from him. Okay? So, and not only that, I don't know if you know, but pretty much all the stuff in the Quran pertaining to Jesus is taken from Gnostic sources, which is very bizarre. Like everything in the Quran is from the 1st century CE period, pretty much up until the time of Muhammad. Another example is the Syriac infancy gospel. So you know in the Quran when Jesus speaks from the cradle. Well, what does he say in the Quran?
Let me just pull up the verse.
And then I'm going to show you what he says in the Syriac infancy gospel. Again, you'll see. This is a Gnostic source. Okay. So I'm trying to show you the consistency. And remember, I'm not the only one who's telling you this. Like Gabriel Reynolds also agrees with this.
Yeah.
Okay?
So I know Gnostics like in real life, whom I'm friends with, and Gnostics believe that the Quran, even modern Gnostics, the remnants of Gnosticism, they believe that the Quran is in harmony with their Gnostic Bibles.
But the point is, okay, you're talking about regular lay people. I'm talking about academics who've studied these texts. Like Gabriel Reynolds is the professor of Islamic studies at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana, one of the biggest, most well-known, credible universities. This is his expert view, and it's not just him. He's not the only person that's who's written on this. And this would be my question to you, right? It's the same applies to the Quran and the Bible, right? Who's more of an authority, right? Like I'll give you an example, right? I know, right? I know Muslims who believe, for example, that Jesus was put on the cross, but that Allah preserved him on the cross and then raised him up to himself. So in other words, what they'll say is, yeah, Allah caused him to die and then resurrected him back up to himself. That's some Muslims. You'd agree with me that they're totally at error for saying that. Okay, if you go to the substitution viewpoint, okay. So quoting to me to some people who believe they're in line with something else doesn't exactly work when we stack up their claims and we see if what they're saying is actually valid. Okay, because as I said, I've also gone through these Gnostic sources. Okay, and then on top of that, I've checked it with what academics have said about it, and academics are in agreement here. Okay, that these Gnostic sources and traditions, they view Jesus as divine. That's why consistently in their Gospels they portray him as being worshipped and carrying equal authority with God. Okay, and that's something that they've concluded in their works. Okay, now are you going to go with that professional academic opinion that the top scholars have wrote on, or are you going to go with a regular lay person who says, "Oh yeah, I believe everything's in harmony"? I can tell you.
Can you show me a scholar who clearly says that the mainstream Gnostic doctrine was about worshipping Jesus as an entity who was one with the true God or equivalent to God as a divine entity? Because for the reasons that in the Gnostic doctrine they actually worship him, sort of worship him, elevate him, are very different from why.
It's not, dude, hold on. It's not, to be honest, it's not sort of. They say, I just gave you two examples where they directly say he was worshipped. Okay, it's not sort
But they do the same with other eons. If they're not trying to say that Jesus is God.
Can you provide the source for that, please?
Yeah, I was finding that verse when you went for the call.
Did you find it?
Yeah, I'm finding it just now. I'm finding some multiple verses.
Okay. I'm just getting up here for you the Syriac infancy gospel. So, oh yeah, did you get up the one about Jesus from the cradle?
Yeah, wait.
Because I want you to get that up, because I want to show you something from the original Syriac infancy gospel. Hurry.
Yeah, so Surah Maryam, verse 29 to 33, says, "So she pointed to him, they said, 'How can we speak to one who is in the cradle?' Child, he said, 'Indeed, I am the servant of Allah. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet, and he has made me blessed wherever I am, and has enjoined upon me prayer and charity as long as I live, and made me dutiful to my mother, and he has not made me arrogant or wretched. And peace is upon me on the day I was born, the day I die, and the day I'm raised alive.'"
Yeah, hold that verse for a moment, okay? Which one is it? From Surah Al-Ma'idah, right?
Surah Al-Maryam.
Surah Al-Maryam. Okay, hold that verse, because I want to show you something. I think it's this one. Oh yeah, here we go. The Arabic Infancy Gospel of the Savior. A lovely, nice little Gnostic source for us to look at. Share this. All right, can you read that, please?
We find what follows in the book of Joseph, the high priest, who lived in the time of Christ, saying, some say that he is, I don't know how to pronounce
that. Some say that he is Caiaphas.
He has said that Jesus spoke, and indeed when he was lying in his cradle and said to Mary his mother, "I am Jesus, the Son of God, the Logos, whom thou had brought forth, as the angel Gabriel announced to thee, and my Father has sent me for the salvation of the world."
Okay. Now I'm assuming you know what the Greek position on the Logos was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, the Logos being the eternal Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the author of this Gnostic text believes Jesus is the eternal Word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now according to the Quran, now remember this is the one that predates the Quran. This comes before the Quran.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Gabriel Reynolds, again, in his work, the work that I gave you, he commentates on this. Okay, because the Quran takes from this, but in the Quranic version, what you read, does it read like this, or does it take the divinity away from Jesus?
I would say it takes the divinity away.
Exactly, but you can see here that this author views Jesus as the Logos, the eternal Word of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is a Gnostic author, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's his view of Jesus then?
So, Logos in Gnosticism is seen as the attribute of Sophia, which is wisdom, and they believe that Jesus is the incarnation of Logos, which is again seen as
Really,
a
based
physical.
on the Greek?
They believe that Jesus is an incarnation of Logos.
No. You didn't hear my question. You're going away from the question. My question is the Greek term logos, right? What does that mean? What does the word logos mean? I know we say word, right? But it's obviously loaded with meaning, okay? So I'm not just saying what John says. I'm talking about even what Philo of Alexandria says about it. Okay?
So, in Greek, it would mean speech or statement.
Okay, and did Philo, for example, again, we're talking about a non-Christian source here, okay, a Jewish author, okay, Jewish philosopher. Did he believe the Logos was eternal?
I'm not sure.
Yes, he did. Okay, because that was the consistent view. When you say the Word of God, what you're saying is, okay, and even if we go to Greek philosophers who were part of the paganistic culture of the time, okay. For example, Clement of Alexandria commentates on this in one of his books, right? He goes into what the school of thought was at the time from the Greek understanding, okay? The Logos is the embodiment of truth itself. It's the total embodiment of universal truth, okay? So the concept that John is trying to make known, right, is when they say Logos, what they mean is that Christ is the full embodiment of both objective and subjective truth made manifest in human form, okay, in such a way that we can understand the fullness of God's revelation through Christ. Okay, so in some sense, he's the embodiment of all of that, right? So it's a divine title to attribute to anybody. If you claim that someone's a Logos, you're claiming that they are the embodiment of divine truth itself. The fullness of truth that humanity can have through revelation is embodied within that singular figure. Okay, so that's what Logos means. Okay, and they're attributing that to Christ. This author is doing the same thing. Okay, that is the understanding of Logos. There's no changing the term. This was consistent with all the authors. Okay, Philo believed it, the Greeks believed it, John believed it, the later church figures also believed it. That is the consistent interpretation of that term. Okay, so for example, with the Quran, if there's a term that's consistently interpreted in a specific way, I'm not going to sit there and say it's anything else. Okay, so I can tell you with certainty, based on the traditional view of this author believes that Jesus is the eternal Logos. Okay? Now, if he believes that, again, this isn't just me. Buy Gabriel Reynolds' book and check it. Okay? If you don't want to take it from me, take it from an academic who knows more than I do, who's an Islamic scholar. Okay? These are the sort of conclusions he comes to. Okay? What the Quran consistently does is it takes from these sources, okay? And then what it does is whenever Jesus is deified, it takes the deification aspect away from him. Okay, it removes the deification aspect and makes him just a servant, because all of these authors held Jesus within this view of him being highly exalted to being at the right hand of God. Okay. Now, the other thing is, I don't know if you know this, but in Hebraic thought, the right hand of God means equal in authority with. Okay. There's a source on that I have somewhere that I'm going to find in a second. But essentially, that's what that term means. It means at the right hand, it means you're equal in authority with. Okay. So that was a mouthful. What are your thoughts?
So because I would believe that even the early Christians, such as the Gnostics, who had the way that they were understanding these texts and they were still altering their text. What I'm trying to basically say is that because the Quran says that the gospel, the true Injil, it was changed by humans. What I'm trying to say is that the Gnostic gospels have more truth than the four canon gospels that you have in the New Testament. Therefore, why the accounts in the Quran and these gospels match, but they're not exactly the same because the Quran clears it of any
Okay,
distortion.
here's
And
your fallacy. Okay, here's where you're wrong. Okay,
Mm.
these Gnostic texts. Okay, how can you claim they have more truth, right? When all of scholarship is unanimous that they all emerged in the 2nd century and after the 2nd century. The only gospels that are regarded as 1st century texts are the 4 canonical ones. All the non-canonical stuff emerges later, and it emerges from groups that believed in this idea of gnosis, right? If you sit there and you meditate long enough, God will impart some sort of wisdom into you, and then that's how they produce these texts. Okay, that was the general tradition of where the Gnostics would sit and meditate for, as I don't know how long they were doing it for, but this was the process by which they believed they were acquiring this secret knowledge, right? That God was imparting to them. Okay, so how on earth, right, are you claiming that that's more original than texts which predate them? Like, if from a historian standpoint, okay, a historian's going to tell you outright, and I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying it. There's a reason why this historians only use the 4 gospels, the 4 canonical gospels, as their basis for trying to determine the historical Jesus, because they're 1st century texts. They know the origin of the other texts. They come much later from Gnostic groups which believed in deep meditation and these profound spiritual experiences where God would impart gnosis to them. Okay? That's a completely different philosophy and understanding of God. The general Orthodox position among the majority of Christians was in line with what you have relatively within the 4 Gospels, okay? Apart from, obviously, the different leaders where there was debates in the early church, but they were marked. Like, for example, Marcion was marked and targeted by other leaders as being a heretic, okay? And he was kicked out of the church. I don't know if you know this. For some reason, Muslims like to go to Marcion, but Marcion was kicked out of the church by the other bishops. Okay, not just him. This is consistent with all the early church. Sabellius, when he tries to bring this Gnostic position into Christian orthodoxy of the time, okay, which was Sabellianism, what happened to Sabellius? He got kicked out. Okay, Arius comes along then in the 4th century, tries to do the same thing. What happens? Okay, Arius, it's a little bit complicated, okay, with the situation with Nicaea, because there was a toing and froing between Arius and Athanasius. But eventually, which position prevailed? And Athanasius' position prevailed in the end. Okay? Then you move to the 5th century, and then you have this guy Nestorius. Okay? Nestorius comes along, same sort of situation. He tries to force in this Gnostic understanding of Christ and the gospel, and then he gets kicked out. Okay? Now, I don't know if you know this as well, right? But a lot of these groups, these Gnostic groups that were let's say stamped out by the Orthodox Christian position which emerged, okay, eventually stamped out, a lot of them migrated to the Arabian Peninsula. That's why, I don't know if you know this, there's a suggestion or a hypothesis that Muhammad may have thought, okay, that the Gnostic traditions and sources were the original traditions and sources. Okay, that's where they get that from. Okay, because pretty much when you go through the Quran, all of it is from the 1st century CE period up until the time of Muhammad. I'll give you another example. Okay, so do you know the story of Iblis? What's it called? Adam and Eve, and they begin in Jannah. Do you know where that comes from? The original source.
No.
See, this is what I'm saying. I don't know if you know this. That's a 1st century source. It emerged in the 1st century, and it's called The Life of Adam and Eve. It was a 1st century apocryphal Jewish work that was produced.
So the reason that the Quran has these accounts is because we believe that it's from the same God. So therefore, the concepts of such as like Adam and Eve and Satan, they would obviously carry on from previous revelation to the next revelation. And as you're claiming that the 4 Gospels were always seen as Orthodox or canon, there was no such thing as Orthodox Christianity until around 200 AD. There was no such thing as Orthodox Christianity because these 4 Gospels that you currently have in the New Testament, they weren't even attributed to these apostles at all. They weren't
here
seen.
we go. You're going there again. I'm going to ask you now, Provide the direct proof of that. Show me. I'll give you an example. Okay, I'm going to give you a criteria. Okay, to prove your claim. And this, by the way, if you could do this right now, I would believe you. Okay, I would believe your claim. This is the kind of evidence you need to back up, and this is why this position is consistently refuted within academia. Okay, when people bring up the anonymity of the text, the first question that's asked is, "What's your external evidence for that?" And they'll say, "We don't have any. It's just something we're presupposing." Okay, so like for example, in the 2nd century, produce a church father that says these texts were anonymous gospels. Do you have any?
But there's no for a very long
Hold on. We're not deviating. It's a straight question. Produce again. I'm asking for external evidence. In the 2nd century, provide me with an early church leader, a prominent church leader who said that these gospels are anonymous.
Let me just look it up.
Okay, look.
Obviously, I've not memorized names of church.
I know. But I'm saying, generally speaking, if you don't have the evidence for something, it means you probably don't know it. Okay. And if you don't know something, here's the other thing. Again, I'm trying to be fair with you. Okay. If you don't know something, it's probably best not to commentate it until you do further research on it.
So you're claiming that the 4 gospels were seen as necessarily orthodox, right?
No, dude. My apologies. I was supposed to answer your question about Paul. My apologies. Forgive me. We went on a bit of a.
Let me just answer this, and then we can go back to Paul. So, what I'm saying is there is no list of only 4 gospels in the 1st century, most of the 2nd century, and even much of the 3rd century. Early Christians used many gospels alongside these 4, and there was no orthodoxy where they would say that these 4 are the main canon scripture and the other are unaccepted.
You didn't hear my argument. I already answered that. You didn't hear my argument.
So if you read, for instance, one of the biggest early church leaders, Justin Martyr, when you read his works, he doesn't refer to any 4 gospels. Read all of his works. He doesn't even use the term 4 gospels.
Hold on. There's a thing called, and you need to look into this, okay? There's a thing called implicit references. Okay, so for example, right, when Justin Martyr, right, is speaking about Jesus, okay, because remember, Justin Martyr would have been an apostle, right, of one of the apostles, okay, allegedly. Same with Ignatius of Antioch, and because I don't know if you know the tradition, Ignatius of Antioch allegedly was a student of John the Apostle. Okay, and Ignatius of Antioch's theology, according to Ignatius of Antioch, Jesus was the Word of God. Okay, in an eternal sense. Okay, the same with Papias. Okay, Papias was also allegedly a student of John the Apostle. Okay, so when you ask me where are they getting their stuff from, where do you think they're getting it from? And on top of that, okay, when they're quoting Jesus and they're talking about Jesus, why is their portrayal of Jesus perfectly in line with the 4 gospels? Pretty much. Okay, that's called implicit referencing. Okay, so for example, if I'm writing my let's say a letter to a church, which is where we get much of their information, right? We're not talking about commentaries that they wrote on the Gospels. We're just talking about them addressing issues in different churches. So, as you know, Clement of Alexandria has a ton of epistles to different churches. Same with Ignatius of Antioch. Okay, when they're addressing issues within the churches, and then they're rooting the basis of that in their theology. Why is their theology near identical to the theology of the 4 canonical gospels? Where are they getting it from?
So they're getting it from those scriptures and other scriptures as well, because when was the first time that...
Hold on. They don't quote the Gnostic understanding of Jesus. They quote the canonical understanding of Jesus. This is my point. And okay, I'm gonna give you a challenge for next week, right? I hope you come back because this is a good discussion, okay? I want you for next week, okay, and we'll get to the Paul thing in a second, right? Go through the epistles of Ignatius of Antioch, okay? Go through the epistles of Clement of Alexandria. Okay? They're very short, by the way. I'm not giving you a lot of work to do here. And I want you to tell me, right, when you've gone through them and you've spent the time going through them, where or like in terms of their theology, what is it aligning with? Is it aligning with what's in the Gospels, or is it aligning with what's in the Gnostic Gospels? Okay, and I promise you, come next week, you will see that all these church leaders, their theology is aligning with what's in the canonical Gospels. So that's where the inference comes from.
So my point is that the concept of 4 gospels coming from these 4 authors
Mhm.
being the only orthodox canon scripture does not exist. I'm going to go on to explain why. Because
Yeah.
when Justin Martyr, if you read all of his works, he uses one term. He only uses one term when he's referring to the scripture, and that's the memoirs of the apostles. He never names Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John. The first time that these 4 specific scriptures are attributed to these people, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, is by Saint Irenaeus. Before him, none of the early church fathers ever specifically said that these scriptures,
Who
in
was
fact,
Ignatius?
were
Wait,
from.
hold on. Who was Irenaeus an apostle of?
I'm not sure.
You see what I'm saying? He was an apostle of Ignatius of Antioch.
Mm-hmm.
So where did he get this idea of a canon from?
Ignatius of Antioch.
And Ignatius of Antioch was an apostle of who?
So, can you historically prove that?
Yes. Look, okay, next week, okay, between now
Mhm.
and next week, I'm just giving you little things to do and research in the
Mhm.
meantime, okay? I want you to research where Ignatius of Antioch got that from. Because remember, he doesn't just
Mhm.
make it up, he has to be getting it from somewhere, okay?
Mhm.
And we know he's an apostle of, Irenaeus. We know Irenaeus is an apostle of Ignatius, okay?
Mhm.
And then Ignatius is an apostle of John.
Mhm.
I want you to check that between now and next
Mhm.
week. And also check
Mhm.
check the letters, the epistles, and I
Mhm.
want you to see where they're getting their theology from and
Mhm.
what.
So let's talk about what you're saying. So the concept of what I'm trying to say is the concept of Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John didn't emerge until much later. So, like for example, in the time
No,
of
you
Justin
you refute it. You no, hold on.
Mhm.
You saw the contradiction there, okay?
Mhm.
Because you brought up Irenaeus, okay, and I pointed
Mhm.
out to you Irenaeus didn't just make that up, okay?
Mhm.
And I asked you. This is why I was trying to get you to see the connection here, okay?
Mhm.
If he allegedly is a student of Ignatius,
Mhm.
okay, then you said, okay, he would have got it from Ignatius, okay?
Mhm.
And then I said, where did Ignatius get it from if Ignatius was a student of John?
Mhm.
So you,
And Ignatius and Irenaeus, they were debated. Their ideology was debated by other people.
no, they were debating against, okay, certain heretics.
Mhm.
So, for example,
So how
I'll
would you
give you
know
one
that
quick
they
example.
were the
I'll give you one quick example, okay? One example is, and by the way, this is even in Paul's epistles as well, okay?
Mhm.
But in Ignatius's work against heresies, I think it's in the first book of that, chapter 24, he talks about a prominent heretic who was kicked out,
Mhm.
by the way, called Basilides.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
Basilides was the one of the main proponents of this idea of substitution,
Mhm.
because Basilides' view of Jesus was that Jesus was so holy and divine he couldn't have a physical body.
Mhm.
He was totally in line with this idea of Gnostic dualism. Okay,
Mhm.
anything which is spiritual is good, anything which is physical is bad. Okay, and this
Mhm.
was again, this was one of the main prominent Gnostic positions at the time that was being
Mhm.
addressed by other prominent church leaders. Okay,
Mhm.
as I
Mhm.
said, remember Basilides, in his mind,
Mhm.
Jesus was so holy and so exalted he couldn't have a physical body.
Mhm.
Okay, and by the way, Bart Ehrman believes that that's where Muhammad got his idea of substitution from. He ripped it from that. Okay, but in the meantime, I want you to check it. Okay, the stuff that I'm saying, take a note of it, and then check it, and then come back next week, and we can go through your findings. Okay. So let me get back because I forgive me. I should have answered the thing about Paul. We went.
Yeah.
On
So
to
wait. I want to say some other things about this
Yep.
as well. So, so other scholars, right? After the concept of the 4 gospel canon wasn't defined even in about 150 AD, and then we go on to other scholars like Papias, and he says that I did not think that information from books would profit me as much as the utterances of a living voice would. So he values oral tradition over written gospels and describes variant traditions, and he doesn't present a
Sorry, who?
closed written canon.
I didn't hear who you said. Who said that?
Papias.
Oh, Papias. Yeah, but Papias, when Papias identifies gospel authors, who does he identify?
He didn't identify. He didn't attribute any specific gospel to any specific person.
Dude, you need to please, between now and next week, please check the stuff, because I told you this earlier at the very start of our discussion when you asked this question. I said one of the authors that he identifies as a gospel author is Matthew. He writes about that. He also writes about John. Okay, this is what I'm telling you. You need to, between now and next week, okay, and we can continue on from this. Okay, you need to check the stuff. because then we can have a
Mhm.
good discussion, right? Otherwise, you're just saying stuff, and I
Mhm.
know, for example, from going through Papias's works, he doesn't say that. He actually does name gospel authors. Two of them that he
Mhm.
names is John and Matthew, and he actually even goes as far to explain how Matthew wrote Matthew.
Mhm. So he does that, but he never says that there were only four canon gospels, because even after him, you look at people like Clement of Alexandria, and he quotes many gospels approvingly, like the Gospel of the Egyptians, the Gospel of the Hebrews, the secret Gospel of Mark, and so on. And he never
No, he
says
doesn't.
that
He
these.
doesn't quote those. He doesn't
He
quote
does.
those
He
in
does.
that way.
He
No, he
does.
doesn't. He does.
He does.
But look, between now and next week, I'm telling you, please go through the works of Clement. Right? I'm not talking about taking stuff out of context.
Mhm.
The church fathers, a lot of the time, and I think this is where you're getting it from,
Mhm.
because I think you just looked it up on some AI thing. Okay?
Mhm.
I'm telling you, Clement of Alexandria, if you read his stuff, right, his theology is in line with the four canonical gospels. It's not in line with anything else. When they address these other gospels, they always address them in a polemical sense. Okay? So I think the AI itself is confusing what they attack polemically with what they've affirmed as canon. Okay, those are two separate things. Okay, this is why you need to check this out, and this is one of the limitations of AI. AI can confuse the two and conflate the two with each other, right? That's why you need to go to the full source where he writes about this and he deals with this. Like, for example, right? I can tell you for a fact, okay, when Irenaeus attacks polemically the position of Basilides, okay, if I was to use AI in a specific way where I wasn't specific enough in what I was saying, I guarantee you AI would come out with something like, yeah, he affirms the thing of Basilides, when we know that's not true, because he writes about it in his book Against Heresies. He's not affirming it, he's actually polemically attacking it. Okay? This is why I'm saying, okay, between now and next week, check that, okay? Check the stuff that Papias says, check the stuff that Irenaeus says, and then check the chain of narration that goes back to the original apostles, okay? Can we now get on to Paul, and we can focus on those stuff when you've read them more, researched them more next Saturday when I do this? Oh, do you want to come back then next Saturday and we can go through this? Is that okay? I do this Saturday at 1 p.m. What do you think? Okay, okay. You're always welcome to come back. Thank you. I appreciate you willing to have the discussion with me, and we'll pick it up next Saturday. Okay, if that's fair. Okay. Um, I think that's going to be it for today, unless anyone else wants to jump on. Bum. Uh, as far as Islamic defender Yahya is concerned, I'll just quickly reply to your thing. The issue with the Quran is you don't have an original Quran. I mean, you can try and claim that all you want, but the problem is that you have 7 Qira'at, and these 7 Qira'at in certain areas with certain verses, they actually contradict each other. So, for example, I'll just give one example. We'll end with this. But I'm going to show you something from the Warsh. Oh, no, I'm going to show you something else. Hold on. Because I want to, I'm curious to see what you'd say. Okay. Share this. Okay. So this is the Hafs version, and then this is the Khalaf version. So the Hafs version says, this is chapter 37, verse 12. It says, but you wonder, the you in that context is Muhammad, but you wonder while they mock. Then the Khalaf version says, but I wonder. So Allah wonders while they mock. Okay. So which one is correct? That would be my question to Muslims, okay? If your Quran is being perfectly preserved and is preserved on this so-called divine tablet, which is correct? Is it you wonder, the Hafs version, or is it I wonder? As in Allah wonders. Who's doing the wondering here? Is it Allah or Muhammad? Because remember, according to this tradition of the 7 Qira'at, they're supposed to be in perfect alignment with each other. Okay, so which one was revealed? Because your theology claims that they're both correct. If you I'll tell you what, if you ask the guy, the Orthodox Muslim guy, to come on the stream next week, if he's available, if you message him, because he'll probably answer to you versus me, I'd be happy to have him on and we can go through whatever he wants. But anyway, yeah, this particular verse here. So it says, as I said, but you wonder while they mock, and then the Caliph version says, but I wonder while they mock. So my question there when it comes to that is which one is right? Is it you wonder, or is it I wonder? Because remember, if you're Sunni and you accept this idea of the 7 Qira'at, there's supposed to be, there's supposed to be agreement between them. Which one is true? They can't both be right. And I want to just last thing, just before we go, I just want to show something. Okay. So just in terms of Matthew's view of Jesus. I just want to see what Muslims think about this. Share this tab instead. I'm going to show you two things. So this is in the Gospel of Matthew. This is chapter 14. Notice what he says. Okay, we're reading from verse, let's say verse 28. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. He said, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly, you are the Son of God. Now, this is the point I was trying to make to the Yahya guy, okay? Is in what context do they refer to Jesus as the Son of God? How do these authors view Jesus' sonship to the Father? Is it in a mere kind of metaphorical sense, or is it in a divine sense? Well, according to this particular verse, remember, what precedes truly are the Son of God? It's the fact they worshipped him. So in other words, they see a divine feat that they know from the Old Testament, Job 9:8, is something that only God himself does. Okay? But then, after seeing this and recognizing Jesus in the context of this theophany, they then worship him as the Son of God. Because they say, truly, truly you are the Son of God. So their affirmation for the sonship of Christ is a divine feat that they deem worthy of worship. What's the logical conclusion there? The logical conclusion is that Jesus' sonship is divine. It's not merely metaphorical. It's a divine form of sonship to the Father, which provides Christ with this unique innate authority, this unique innate divine nature, right? And that's why they worship him. The same happens in Matthew 28 as well. They worship him again. And this is the thing, right? The context of when Christ is referred to as the Son of God, it's always in a divine sense, okay? It's not in a human sense. It's always in a divine sense. And this is the consistent portrayal that these authors have of Christ as the Son of God, okay? And this is something, this is something that you have to address as a Muslim, okay? Generally speaking, your only get out of jail clause at that point is going to be, well, it's all been corrupted, even though Surah Al-Baqarah verse 89 refutes that notion, but that's besides the point. Okay, we'll finish there, guys. As I said, I do this every Saturday, so you're free to come on. You're free to have a discussion every Saturday at 1 p.m. If you have anyone or you know anyone that you'd like, that you think it'd be good to come on and have a discussion, gladly bring them on, and we'll go through whatever we need to go through. But yeah, until now and then, between now and then rather, I wish you guys the best. I hope that this was edifying. I hope that this gives glory to the one true God who eternally exists as Father, Son, and Spirit. And I hope that for all you people watching who don't know him, that you may know him, and that you may be saved on the day of judgment from God's impending judgment, which I don't want for any one person. And I hope you guys come to know Christ and recognize his lordship, because that's where your true peace is. That's where you'll find life, and that's where you'll be eternally satisfied. And in his name, in his perfect, mighty name, I pray that. Amen.